Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, I'm excited to share a brand new Naruto fanfiction with you. This Uchiha is way too cautious. In this story, Uchiha Kei isn't your typical reckless ninja. Ever since he arrived in this world, he's been unbelievably careful, doing everything possible to survive and avoid making any fatal mistakes. But fate has other plans. When he's assigned to join Minato Namikaze's squad on the dangerous mission to destroy the Kannabi Bridge, Kei realizes he's completely out of his depth, and maybe out of luck. If you enjoy stories about strategy, survival, and the hidden side of the Uchiha, you're going to love this one. Want to access the next part early or read all the chapters yourself? Check out my Patreon page, patreon.com/MV1717. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update. Alright, let's dive into This Uchiha is Way Too Cautious.
Part 4 of This Uchiha is Way Too Cautious. Chapter 111, Conspiracy. Uchiha Kei had already seen through it. The guy in front of him was just a shadow clone. However, Kei could also tell that this person was likely a sensory ninja. Sensory ninjas were always a major nuisance on the battlefield, so Uchiha Kei didn't hesitate to prioritize eliminating him first. What surprised him, though, was that he had been bracing for Kitsuchi's sudden intervention. After all, taking out a sensory ninja was like blinding their entire group. Anyone with a bit of sense would protect someone like that, even if it was just a shadow clone. Yet, Kitsuchi didn't make a move. He didn't even try to stop Uchiha Kei, allowing him to swiftly eliminate the shadow clone with a single slash. Although Uchiha Kei found this unexpected, as a seasoned veteran of the battlefield, he wouldn't miss the opportunity created by the enemy's temporary loss of vision. Moreover, he had begun to guess what was going on. His scarlet eyes swept the surroundings. With a sudden dash, Uchiha Kei appeared in front of a rock ninja, grabbed his neck, and twisted it forcefully. Releasing his hand, Kei immediately used the body flicker technique to reappear behind another Iwa Nin. His sharp ninjutsu pierced straight through the enemy's chest. Amid the smoke and confusion, the screams of Iwa Nin echoed one after another, but in Uchiha Kei's crimson gaze, everything was clear and visible. When the smoke finally dispersed, Uchiha Kei stood silently at his original spot, facing Kitsuchi, who was only a few steps away. His face wore a mocking smile, and around him lay the corpses of 4 Iwa Nin, already lifeless. Kei's speed was terrifying. As he grew more familiar with the Mangekyo Sharingan, the traits granted by its power manifested more fully within him. Besides, Kei was already an expert in surprise attacks. In such dense smoke, not to mention ordinary Chunin, even Jonin could be fatally ambushed by him, or at least severely wounded. You seem to have no feelings for your subordinates, Uchiha Kei said with a cold smile, shaking the blood off his blade as he stared at Kitsuchi. Or maybe, you should be thanking me. HMPH. Kitsuchi glanced at the fallen Iwa Nin scattered around, sighing softly. Indeed, from the perspective of Iwagakure, I should thank you. But as for myself, I will avenge them. How hypocritical, Uchiha Kei sneered, shaking his head. Still, it's good news. It seems Iwa Nin intends to negotiate seriously. Is it because of the pressure from Kumogakure? Or is it the psychological pressure from Captain Minato? It's both, and neither, Kitsuchi replied, shaking his head again and sighing. You're sharp and smart. If you had been born in Iwagakure, perhaps we could have been friends. But here and now, all that exists between us is hatred. I will avenge my subordinates, my friends, and all those Iwa Nin who died by your hands. Although Kitsuchi's tone sounded weary, the hatred in his voice was unmistakable. Nevertheless, Uchiha Kei learned some interesting things from this exchange. First, that Iwa Nin had decided to accept Konoha's terms and withdraw their forces. Second, that Kitsuchi, along with the group of Iwa Nin opposing the negotiations, were likely being used to put pressure on Konoha, to prevent them from making excessive demands. But there was another, even more crucial reason, to purge disobedient ninja. One shouldn't assume these rebellious ninjas were simply loyal or patriotic. In truth, their actions challenged the authority of the leadership. On the battlefield, no one could tolerate such insubordination, because once they believed they were right, they would act solely based on their own judgment, a dangerous approach that could easily escalate the conflict and hatred between Iwa and Konoha, dragging the war into unpredictable chaos. Thus, these troublemakers needed to be dealt with. However, the leadership of Iwagakure knew that if they killed their own men, it would cause serious problems, damaging morale and shaking their own authority. But if they died at the hands of Konoha ninja, it was a different story. Given the existing hatred from the war, their deaths would not only boost morale but also fuel the Iwa nin's motivation to fight against Kumogakure later on. At the same time, it conveniently helped the village clean out internal threats, a win-win situation. Even executioners shed crocodile tears. Uchiha Kei adjusted his grip on the ninjutsu in his hand, a vivid blue chakra coating the blade. But enough talk, he said coldly. I'll send you to reunite with your comrades. I hope they'll understand your choices when you meet them. No, Kitsuchi replied, every muscle in his body tensing, you'll personally descend and redeem them. This is my redemption as well. The moment he finished speaking, Kitsuchi flashed to Uchiha Kei's side. Powerful chakra surged violently through his body, and with a single punch, the ground beneath them shattered. The impact was so fierce that entire swaths of surrounding trees collapsed from the shockwave. But Uchiha Kei had already dodged. After all, he was only 13 years old, raw physical strength was hardly his strong suit. However, this time, Kei felt no fear toward Kitsuchi. His mastery over the Sharingan had grown sharper, and his understanding of the Mangekyo Sharingan had also deepened. The advantages granted by the Mangekyo had begun to manifest in him, and his chakra reserves were nearly full. He was no longer the weak and worn-out version of himself from before. The Uchiha Kei standing here today was someone who had undergone a complete metamorphosis. With cold, detached eyes, Kei watched Kitsuchi carefully. He noticed that although Kitsuchi kept his gaze locked onto him, he deliberately avoided looking at Kei's face, focusing instead on Kei's body. It was a clear attempt to guard against genjutsu. Seeing this, Uchiha Kei's smile deepened even further. If you seek your own death, he thought, don't blame anyone else when it comes for you. The wind howled around them, kicking up sand and dust that lashed at their faces. Neither of them paid it any mind. Their auras continued to rise, the pressure growing heavier by the second. Then, just as the smoke and haze began to settle, the two figures moved simultaneously, like twin streaks of light clashing at the center of the battlefield. Open. In truth, whether or not Kitsuchi looked him in the eye, Uchiha Kei had already decided to use the power of the Mangekyo Sharingan. However, he didn't plan on using any eye techniques. The Mangekyo's enhanced perception far surpassed the standard 3-tomo Sharingan, and its dynamic vision had reached unimaginable heights. Kitsuchi's death was inevitable. Kei had already made up his mind. He would not hold back. Clang, clang, clang. The sounds of kunai and blade clashing filled the air as the two engaged in fierce combat. One was a powerhouse of taijutsu, brimming with raw strength. The other, impossibly fast and agile, weaving through attacks with deadly precision. Their styles were completely different, yet together they danced a deadly ballet across the scarred battlefield. However, as time wore on, Kitsuchi's body was riddled with wounds. Blood flowed freely down his frame, staining the ground beneath him. Meanwhile, Uchiha Kei moved like a butterfly flitting through flowers, graceful, swift, and merciless, bringing endless peril to his opponent with every strike. Chapter 112. Art of Earth and Stone. At this moment, Kitsuchi was filled with both shock and frustration. It had only been a short time since they last met, yet Uchiha Kei had become almost unrecognizable, as if he were a completely different person. Not only was his speed drastically faster, but unlike before, Kei could now actually break through Kitsuchi's defenses. If not for Kitsuchi's deep foundation in physical strength and his relentless offensive tactics to keep Kei pressured, he might already have been lying dead on the ground. He had to admit, the personal prowess of the Uchiha clan was truly exceptional. It was no wonder this kid was able to later kill Gari and even wipe out Ishimazu Hiragi's squad. But even so, this wasn't the limit of Kitsuchi's abilities. He wasn't just strong in taijutsu, his earth-style ninjutsu was honed to an extraordinary, almost divine level. Seeing arcs of lightning dancing across Uchiha Kei's hand, Kitsuchi coldly snorted. He wasn't Might Guy. He couldn't perfectly avoid eye contact and counter Kei's genjutsu with pure instinct. However, at his level of experience, he could at least manage to some extent. Even if it came at the cost of sustaining injuries, it was still manageable. Kitsuchi took a step back and rapidly formed hand seals. In an instant, his hands clapped together, completing the jutsu, and a massive earth wall erupted from the ground between them. Uchiha Kei immediately thrust his left hand into the wall, his arm piercing clean through the thick earth. Yet the wall showed no sign of crumbling. Instead, under Kitsuchi's chakra control, it rapidly solidified once again. Kei's scarlet eyes scanned the earth wall. With his enhanced vision, he could even faintly see Kitsuchi's figure on the other side. Tilting his head slightly, Kei let the Chidori in his left hand surge outward, spreading into a massive web of electricity that wrapped around the entire wall. Kitsuchi, sensing the danger, quickly retreated. After all, lightning release was a natural counter to earth techniques. Sizzle. A crisp sound echoed in Kitsuchi's ears. It wasn't the thunderous explosion he had anticipated, but rather the faint hiss you might hear when tossing a burning cigarette into water. The earth wall remained completely intact. That seemingly overwhelming web of lightning hadn't even left a scratch. Uchiha Kei's attack had little real power behind it. Slowly withdrawing his hand from the wall, Kei casually flicked the dust from his fingers. He didn't actually know how to use Chidori Stream yet, he was still waiting for Kakashi to develop it. HMPH. Kitsuchi grunted coldly, seething inside. He couldn't believe that despite his expertise in earth release, he had been tricked so easily by a mere kid, and at his most proficient field no less. It was undeniable, Uchiha Kei's oppressive pressure had thrown him off balance. After suffering so many setbacks, he no longer dared to act carelessly, and in doing so, he had missed a perfect opportunity to strike. Moreover, Kei's sudden burst of speed was still vivid in his mind. Caution was the only rational choice. Taking a deep breath, Kitsuchi gripped a kunai tightly and lunged at Uchiha Kei, his body moving like a cannonball. In a flash, he shattered the very earth wall he had just created. Boom! Fragments of stone and dust exploded outward. Sharp pieces of debris shot toward Uchiha Kei like a rain of shrapnel. Even the trees surrounding them were torn apart by the sheer force of Kitsuchi's strike. Seeing the explosion of debris, Uchiha Kei immediately retreated, his crimson Sharingan locked onto Kitsuchi as he rapidly formed hand seals. In less than a second, his fire release technique was completed. Fire release. Great Dragon Fire Technique. Under Kei's precise control, a massive burst of flames erupted from the ground, perfectly blocking Kitsuchi's incoming punch just before it could connect. At the same time, Kei unsheathed his ninja blade once more, blue chakra surging along its edge as he slashed at Kitsuchi's fist. Unfortunately, this time Kitsuchi's fist had already transformed into solid rock, its terrifying hardness easily withstood Kei's slash without taking any visible damage. However, Kei only smiled slightly. Of course he recognized the earth release, rock fist technique. While it enhanced both attack and defense by turning the hand into stone, did that really mean a chakra-imbued blade couldn't harm it? Reikiri. Suddenly, Kei's blade erupted with a surge of terrifying lightning chakra. Already scorched by the earlier flames, Kitsuchi's stone fist was now assaulted by lightning, and he could no longer maintain its hardened form. Failing to land his punch, Kitsuchi quickly retreated. His right hand reverted to normal, though a fresh gash now marred his skin. Scarlet blood trickled down, resembling Kei's own blood-red Sharingan. Yet, Kitsuchi showed no sign of pain or hesitation. Even as he withdrew, he launched another earth-style technique to intercept Kei's pursuit. What a turtle, Kei muttered under his breath. He had to admit, the defensive capabilities of the Iwagakure shinobi were truly despair-inducing. Kei had fought on the battlefield for 7 years. He had clashed with Sand Shinobi in the Land of Rivers, battled Cloud Ninja in the Land of Hot Springs, and was later transferred to the Land of Grass to fight against Stone Shinobi. Aside from not having faced the Hidden Mist or Whirlpools directly, Kei had essentially fought shinobi from every major village. And among them all, the Iwagakure ninja were undoubtedly the hardest to bring down. Their earth techniques, while somewhat lacking offensively, gave them terrifying defensive power, enough to withstand most other ninjutsu. Still, Kei remained calm. He had a trump card prepared, a special gift he intended to present to Kitsuchi. Leaping lightly into the air, Kei easily evaded Kitsuchi's earth release, great ground core technique. Meanwhile, he pondered how to finish this fight quickly. Who knew how things were going for Kakashi right now? And there was always the risk of White Zetsu spying under Madara's orders. But Kei wasn't overly concerned. He doubted that Uchiha Madara would come looking for trouble, not after securing Obito and confirming the goodness still lingering in Obito's heart. While deep in thought, Kei suddenly noticed something odd. Kitsuchi's hand seal speed had slowed slightly. Sensing danger, Kei didn't hesitate. He swiftly pulled out several kunai and hurled them toward Kitsuchi, noticing that Kitsuchi's chakra was boiling violently within his body. However, Kitsuchi seemed well prepared. Even when Kei's kunai shifted trajectory midair, aiming for his blind spots, they ultimately failed to inflict any injury. The moment Kei landed back on the ground, his expression darkened. The earth beneath his feet had turned into a swamp. Earth release. Swamp of the underworld. The name of the technique flashed across Kei's mind instantly. Even worse, he saw that the scattered rubble around him had fused into two massive, hemispherical boulders, now hurtling toward him under Kitsuchi's chakra control. No one can escape. You will be crushed between the mountains and slumber forever. Kitsuchi sneered, still careful not to meet Kei's eyes. You should feel honored to witness this technique. I'm still perfecting it, but it's already more than enough. Added weight earth technique, huh? Kei muttered, glancing at the two converging boulders. He sighed softly. Impressive. With chakra levels like that and such a technique, maybe someday you'll even be able to trap a tailed beast. Have you accepted your fate, Uchiha brat? Your name is Uchiha Kei, right? That's right, Uchiha Kei. Kei's voice remained calm. But, why are you so certain you're going to win? Chapter 113. Despicable and Shameless. Uchiha Kei's voice was calm, almost serene, and a faint smile even tugged at the corner of his lips. But at that moment, Kitsuchi's expression stiffened. In an instant, he cancelled his jutsu without hesitation. He ignored the chakra inside his body spiraling slightly out of control and transformed his arm into hardened rock once more, swinging a powerful punch behind him toward the approaching kunai. Boom! The ground exploded beneath the sheer force of his blow, leaving a massive crater in its wake. But as he struck, a shadow had already leapt into the air. Like a graceful dancer, the figure dodged the shockwave with elegant precision, then brought a blade crashing down toward Kitsuchi. Aiya, you saw through it, Uchiha Kei chuckled nonchalantly. Your combat instincts really are frighteningly sharp, if it weren't for the little hint I dropped. You're wrong, Kitsuchi snapped, trying to speak, but his expression instantly shifted. Kei was already upon him. Kitsuchi narrowly dodged the slash, quickly weaving hand signs. But in the next moment, the Uchiha Kei before him swelled and detonated with a thunderous explosion. The blast sent Kitsuchi skidding backward uncontrollably. He barely regained his footing when he heard the piercing whistle of a blade slicing through the air. He knew all too well what it felt like to be hit by that blade. Uchiha Kei wielded lightning release. Kitsuchi roared and hastily focused his chakra behind him. He couldn't move. Forcefully canceling the jutsu had left his chakra unstable, and the explosion had shaken him up badly. With no other choice, he decided to tank the blow. Kitsuchi was confident. He might get injured, but it wouldn't be fatal. But he was wrong. Once again, Uchiha Kei had tricked him. Reikiri. The moment Kei's chakra-infused blade, glowing with vibrant blue lightning, touched Kitsuchi's body, lightning surged violently. The already sharp edge of the sword became even more devastating with the added piercing power of lightning release. Lightning overcomes earth. With a powerful slash, Kei's blade cut cleanly through Kitsuchi's body, which was as hard as stone, slicing through it like tofu. Kitsuchi grunted in pain, then crouched, intending to retreat. But in the next instant, his expression turned ghastly. The lightning chakra had invaded his body, paralyzing him from within. Despicable. Shameless. Those words echoed furiously in his mind. Uchiha Kei had deceived him, utterly and completely. Kei had used this sword technique before, but back then, it had only seemed like a high-speed, high-penetration lightning-style strike. So this time, Kitsuchi had braced himself to be injured, but not crippled. Now, his paralyzed limbs told a different story. This brat called Uchiha Kei was far more sinister than he let on. Kitsuchi gritted his teeth, trying to force his body to move. But the effort sent him collapsing to the ground. Kei didn't pause for a second. With a cold gleam in his eyes, he slashed down with his blade once more, this time cleaving Kitsuchi's left arm clean off. Arg! Kitsuchi let out a blood-curdling scream as crimson spurted violently from the severed limb. But he couldn't move. Not even a twitch. All he could do was raise his head and glare at Uchiha Kei, using that gaze to convey his fury, his hatred, and his unyielding pride. Kei had already deactivated his Mangekyo Sharingan, reverting to the standard 3-tomo form. Without using ocular techniques, the Mangekyo drained only minimal chakra and almost no visual power. No wonder Uchiha Madara had been able to fight Hashirama Senju for so long, Perhaps it wasn't just that he avoided excessive eye techniques, but also because of the Indra chakra in his body. I already told you, why would you assume victory was guaranteed? Kei walked leisurely toward Kitsuchi, stabbing his sword into the ground just inches from Kitsuchi's throat. Seems I was right all along. Despicable, Kitsuchi muttered through gritted teeth, his speech slurred by paralysis. Ah, thanks. Kei smiled. If you'd added, shameless, too, that would have been perfect. But hey, didn't I even give you a warning? You should be thanking me for saving you the chakra. Kitsuchi nearly choked on his own blood. After a long pause, he chose to stop responding to this infuriating bastard. He had seen shameless people before, but never someone like Uchiha Kei, who treated shamelessness as a badge of honor. Now that he had time to reflect, Kitsuchi finally pieced it together. Kei's strategy had been deceptively simple. While pretending to defend with his jutsu, he'd used a shadow clone to transform into a kunai, launching himself right into Kitsuchi's blind spot. This guy, with the Sharingan, he likely saw through the danger in my jutsu, and so he chose to lie in wait, preparing for a surprise attack. It was my own impatience that doomed me. Uchiha Kei had gotten under my skin. He was just too fast. I could barely track him, let alone land a solid hit. On top of that, I couldn't meet his gaze directly. The Sharingan made it impossible. Every move I made, he seemed to see through it all. That's why I tried to set a trap, blasting apart the ground, creating a debris field, and catching him just as he landed, then finishing him off in one blow. But I rushed it. The Sharingan is a nightmare to deal with. He even saw through my intentions, and chose to counter with an ambush. I didn't even check carefully. And that bastard Kei, he was ruthless. He launched a kunai as a decoy from above, catching me off guard. Because one of those kunai was real. Just look at the wound on his shoulder, it clearly came from transforming into that kunai himself. His so-called kind warning earlier. Just a trick to disrupt my chakra flow. After that, he used a shadow clone and a substitution jutsu, detonated the clone to force me into a defensive posture, then used the smoke as cover to
blind me. And finally, the finishing blow, a blade imbued with lightning release. Explosively fast, piercing, and paralyzing. Kitsuchi sighed deeply. Even though he'd cursed Kei as despicable and shameless, this was the way of a shinobi. No matter how dirty or underhanded the tactics, victory is all that matters. History only remembers the victors. The ones who live. Losers. They get dumped in the trash heap of history, where they can cry to each other about how unfair life was. Any last words? Uchiha Kei looked down at the silent Kitsuchi, a sneer tugging at his lips. I will. I'll be waiting for you, in the Pure Land. Kitsuchi's words came out slurred. I'll wait, for you forever. Good night, Kei replied calmly, watching as Kitsuchi slowly closed his eyes. He gripped his ninja blade, preparing to pull it from the ground and slice Kitsuchi's throat to finish it. But in the next instant, a flash of yellow appeared. A hand caught Kei's wrist mid-motion, firm and unwavering. / Chapter 114. Insurance. Captain Minato. The moment Uchiha Kei saw Namikaze Minato, his expression darkened. He knew, he probably wouldn't be able to kill Kitsuchi now. Uchiha Kei was well aware of the consequences that would follow if he did. Killing Kitsuchi could sabotage the entire peace negotiation effort. After all, this guy was the son of the third Tsuchikage. And the third Tsuchikage wasn't like Hiruzen Sarutobi. That old man was explosive and stubborn. Even Minato himself had once had the chance to kill Kitsuchi but refrained, likely for strategic reasons. All of that made Kei incredibly frustrated. Why couldn't you just have shown up a little later this time too? Looks like I can't kill him after all, can I? With a cold snort, Kei kicked Kitsuchi
in the head, preventing the guy from trying to slit his own throat. Only then did he draw back his ninja blade and sneer. For the sake of the village's negotiations, to avoid further trouble, is that it? Yeah, Minato rubbed the back of his head awkwardly. Since you already figured it out, I'm sure you understand our situation. I'm sorry, Kei-kun. Then, to Kei's surprise, Minato bowed deeply in apology. Looking at Minato, still bent at a full 90-degree angle, Kei felt conflicted. He hated Kitsuchi. That wasn't even a question. He wouldn't have staged this whole ambush otherwise. But Minato's sudden arrival had thrown everything into disarray. Kei glanced at the unconscious Kitsuchi lying on the ground. All that effort, just for this result. He could hardly accept it. Is that it? Kei sighed. We just let him walk away. Please, Kei-kun. Minato stayed bowed low, his posture speaking louder than his words. Kei took a deep breath, trying to suppress his irritation, trying not to let emotion cloud his judgment. And soon enough, he calmed down. He began weighing Kitsuchi's value rationally. Despite their grudge, the truth was, Kitsuchi wasn't an easy kill. Killing him, especially after just being honored as a hero of the leaf, could tarnish Kei's reputation. Just look at the Iwagakure shinobi scattered at his feet, weren't they enough blood for now? Looking further ahead, in the canon future of the Fourth Great Ninja War, Kitsuchi would actually prove to be a strong and valuable commander. Of course, that future might no longer play out the same way now that Uchiha Kei was involved, but still, some things were worth preserving. Even if Kei didn't know what the future held, he did know what mattered now. The real asset here was Minato Namikaze. If sparing Kitsuchi earned Minato's goodwill, Kei could use that. Leverage it, shape it, and when the time came for serious talks, ones that required pressure and persuasion, he could use that goodwill as cover for more aggressive negotiation. This was an opportunity Kei couldn't afford to waste. He closed his eyes, shutting off his Sharingan and calming his emotions. When he opened them again, he wore an expression of reluctant acceptance, mixed with a tinge of resignation. With a flick of his wrist, he sheathed his ninja blade. Even as Minato stayed bowed, he noticed, and exhaled in relief. Fine. I won't kill him, Kei said flatly. But I want a few words with Kitsuchi. Alone. Of course. Minato stood up with a bright smile. I'll give you some space. You're not afraid I'll finish him off? Kei tilted his head, voice icy. I trust you, Kei-kun, Minato said without a hint of hesitation. You're not an ordinary ninja. I believe in your judgment. Besides, you're a hero of Konoha. Hero of Konoha, huh? Kei chuckled inwardly. But his expression remained calm. As Minato turned and walked away, Kei didn't bother checking if he was secretly watching or preparing to use Flying Thunder God to interfere if needed. He walked over to Kitsuchi, who, despite the blow to his head, was still surprisingly conscious. Looks like luck's on your side, Kei said with a cold smirk. You get to live. HMPH. Kitsuchi snorted. You should have killed me. Sooner or later, I will kill you. Worried I'll expose your little plan to purge your own men. Kei suddenly grabbed him by the throat, Mangekyo Sharingan activating once again. You can deny it all you want. Iwa won't believe Konoha's words anyway. But just to be safe. Those eyes, Kitsuchi's gaze froze, then began to glaze over as Kei's genjutsu took hold. Kei stared at him, letting the illusion dig deep. As soon as Kitsuchi's mind began slipping into confusion, he deactivated the Mangekyo. He couldn't be sure Kitsuchi had seen the full form of his Sharingan, but Kei didn't want any loose ends. So he placed a genjutsu on him, not just to cloud his memory, but to make him completely forget anything unusual about Kei's eyes. Overkill? Maybe, but only a Mangekyo illusion gave Kei true peace of mind. Only it could erase all the messy unpredictability. Standing up, Kei's eyes returned to their natural black. He didn't even glance back at Kitsuchi, who was now staring blankly, head lolling as he tried to orient himself. Kei turned and walked back toward Minato. The blonde-haired Jonin was standing quietly under the broken remains of a massive tree, waiting. The area around them had been devastated by the battle between Kei and Kitsuchi. Such was the absurd power of shinobi, they could sometimes vanish without a trace, and other times reshape the very land they fought on. Finished. Minato still wore his trademark gentle smile. Sorry I was late. This wouldn't have happened otherwise. It's fine. I'm used to it, Kei replied, shaking his head. You were late last time too. Nearly killed me, remember? Yeah, I'm sorry. Minato's smile faltered a bit as the memory returned, of Obito's death. This time, I was stuck in a meeting. He sighed softly, fatigue visible on his face. Chapter 115. What do I get in return? This time, Namikaze Minato's delay had indeed been caused by a meeting. At that moment, he had been negotiating with Iwagakure representatives, under the guidance of Jiraiya and Shikaku Nara. As the core military force on the grass country front, Minato's presence alone carried immense strategic weight. His words held considerable influence, and both sides paid close attention to his stance. While he was deep in a heated exchange with one of the Iowa delegates, he suddenly sensed a chakra fluctuation from one of his flying thunder god kunai. Immediately, he realized that Fukuhiko and the others were in trouble. But even so, he couldn't just walk out, the negotiations were crucial. They directly impacted the post-war division of benefits and future alliances. So, despite his growing anxiety, Minato forced himself to finish his statements as quickly and clearly as possible before finally teleporting away. Even with that urgency, he still arrived a little late. The first point he jumped to was Kakashi's location, since it was his kunai that triggered the flying thunder god signal. By the time Minato appeared, Kakashi's battle was nearly over. There was no doubt about it, Kakashi was a genius. Having returned to the path of the blade and learned to integrate his Sharingan with powerful ninjutsu, he was no longer someone ordinary Jonin could deal with. He might not be able to breeze through enemies like Uchiha Kei, darting through them like a butterfly through flowers, but between the insight granted by the Sharingan, his solid Kenjutsu, and the elemental advantage of lightning style over earth style, Kakashi held a decisive upper hand. After assisting Kakashi by taking down one enemy, Minato quickly asked about the situation. Upon learning how serious it had become, he immediately teleported to Fukuhiko's location. And it turned out to be the right call, Fukuhiko was in real danger. Rin Nohara, despite her efforts, lacked the strength to hold off the Iwagakure shinobi they were facing. Minato swiftly eliminated their enemies and ordered Rin to focus on treating Fukuhiko's injuries. Then, without delay, he jumped to the next marked locations. He checked in on Kenta Amai and Ayaka Hyuga's battlefield, and was surprised by what he found. Even without his intervention, they were doing just fine. The two who had been paired with Uchiha Kei were clearly no pushovers. Their fight wasn't easy, but they weren't at a disadvantage either. In fact, it looked like both were on the verge of victory. Minato couldn't help but feel a flicker of admiration for Kei's team. Clearly, his companions were more than competent. Once that was clear, he left without interfering any further, and headed straight toward Uchiha Kei's location. Namikaze Minato didn't see Kitsuchi anywhere on his way over, and that alone led him to one conclusion: Kitsuchi had likely gone after Uchiha Kei. This made him uneasy. He still remembered how Kei and Kenta Amai had nearly been killed by Kitsuchi before, and having faced Kitsuchi himself, Minato knew just how troublesome the man could be. But what he didn't expect was the scene that greeted him when he finally found Kei. Uchiha Kei was just about to kill Kitsuchi. Looks like fate really doesn't want Kitsuchi dead, Kei sighed, his tone tinged with regret. A bit of a shame, but I suppose it can't be helped. I'm sorry, Kei. Minato could only offer an apology. He had no idea what else to say. Mind sharing how the negotiations went? Kei tilted his head slightly. I might even have some interesting intel you'd find useful. The negotiations? Minato exhaled softly. Iwagakure is still taking a hardline stance, and the third Hokage's bottom line is. Minato sighed again, then took a moment to organize his thoughts before explaining the situation to Kei. Technically, the details of the negotiations weren't something Minato should be discussing, but Kei had just done him a huge favor by sparing Kitsuchi, and Minato had always had a good impression of him. Besides, Kei was a sharp individual. Who knows? He might offer some valuable insight. Kei listened in silence, all the while reflecting on how drastically his presence in this world had altered the course of events. Yes, things had changed, dramatically. One of the most blatant changes was the scrapping of that shameful original clause from the canon timeline: no reparations from the land of Earth, acknowledgement of their military actions. Now, the balance had shifted. Thanks to the presence of thousands of Iwagakure shinobi trapped behind enemy lines, and especially with the Five Tails Jinchuriki held hostage, the third Hokage had secured a much stronger bargaining position. Even so, from Kei's perspective, and frankly, from most of the Konoha delegation's perspective, the current terms still fell short. The updated deal read: the land of Earth must acknowledge defeat and pay a certain amount of war reparations. In return, Konoha would release all prisoners, including the Five Tails Jinchuriki, abstain from further conflict with Iwagakure, and even offer military supplies free of charge. Objectively, this was a better deal than before. But in truth, it still wasn't much of a win. War reparations were to be expected from the losing side, and trading prisoners for compensation was normal protocol. But that final clause, free military supplies, reeked of humiliating appeasement. On paper, it might seem like a strategic ploy, helping prolong a conflict between the land of Earth and the land of Lightning. But did the third Hokage really believe that once the Land of Earth freed up a front, they'd continue fighting the Land of Lightning? Especially with the five tails back on their side, and two nations now each possessing a tailed beast, it was unlikely the elders in either village would support further conflict. Clearly, the third knew this. He had to. In reality, what he'd done was allow the Land of Earth to buy back their captured troops and resources, while also walking away with free supplies, all in exchange for peace. In other words, even if the treaty looked more respectable than the one in canon, at its core, it was still the same disappointing compromise. As Minato spoke, Kei could tell the man understood this all too well. He wore the face of a man with a sharp political mind, but no power to change the outcome. Please, Kei, Minato said with a weary sigh, keep this between us. Negotiations are still ongoing, but the third believes ending the war is the top priority. So in the end, Kei spread his hands, expression flat. All we got was a shiny title, victorious nation, and nothing else. After all we sacrificed. Kei. Minato cut him off immediately. You're not the only one who feels that way. Jiraiya-sensei, Shikaku, they're all frustrated too. But what can we do? Minato's helplessness was real. He didn't want this outcome either, but what power did he truly have? Sure, he was a Jonin, and even the leader of a Jonin squad, but so what? Even his teacher, Jiraiya, one of the legendary Sannin, was powerless to change things. He was doing all he could just to hold the line. Just like Kei said, Konoha's so-called victory amounted to nothing more than a formality. A title. Captain Minato. Kei suddenly smiled, a trace of something sharp behind his expression. What if? I'm just saying what if? I had intel that could shift the balance in these negotiations, force Iwagakure to the table on our terms. What would I get in return? Chapter 116. Do you want to be Hokage? Part 1. Kei-kun. Minato Namikaze furrowed his brows. He couldn't quite figure out Uchiha Kei's intentions. Intel that could shift the balance of negotiations and even force Iwagakure to submit, and Kei had that kind of information. And now, he wanted to trade it. That unsettled Minato. He could tell Kei was in a bad mood. After all, he'd come within moments of killing a man who hated him to the bone, a man whose death would have reduced future risks, and yet, he was forced to stop, to let him go. No one would be in a good mood after that. But to leverage classified intel for personal benefit. That felt a bit too much. There's still time, Captain Minato. Kei sat calmly on the stump of a tree that had been cleanly sliced through, a faint smile on his lips. And I just happen to have something I want to talk to you about. As for the intel, take a look around. Maybe you'll figure it out without me even needing to say anything. What is it you want, Kei-kun? Minato took a deep breath and asked directly, though as he turned to scan the battlefield, he quickly gave up. There really wasn't much to see. Though Kei always preferred a precise, technique-driven style and hadn't used any overwhelming jutsu, his opponent Kitsuchi had gone all out. His brute force taijutsu and earth-style techniques had turned the whole area into a wasteland. As for the Iwa nin who'd been caught in the crossfire, those corpses had long since vanished. Even if they found anything, it'd likely just be scattered limbs, barely useful for analysis. So Minato gave up on guessing and turned his attention back to Kei, deciding to see what the Uchiha truly had in mind. Minato was curious. What did Kei want from him? He was just a regular Jonin. Sure, he was the leader of the elite Jonin unit, but that didn't equate to real political power. If Kei wanted some kind of benefit from the village, Minato wouldn't be able to grant it. I just have one question for you, Captain Minato. Kei's smile faded slightly as he looked directly at him. Have you ever dreamed of becoming Hokage? Hokage. Minato's pupils contracted slightly at the question, but almost instantly, he smiled brightly. Hokage. Huh, every child born in Konoha dreams of becoming Hokage someday. I imagine you've thought about it too, Kei-kun. It was a perfectly deflective answer, smooth and unrevealing. But Kei noticed the flicker in Minato's eyes, and he knew exactly what that meant. He also understood why Minato was hesitant. Minato was, after all, Jiraiya's disciple, the leader of the elite Jonin, and a core member of Konoha's inner circle. Though he wasn't yet in the highest power echelon, he was clearly from the right bloodline of the so-called Hokage faction. His wife, the Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails. So he had access to all sorts of privileged information, and once you got a glimpse of how the village truly operated, you'd understand. Being excellent wasn't enough to become Hokage. You had to be excellent and have the approval of the right power blocks. Take the case of the 5th Hokage in the original timeline. Tsunade only rose to power because no one wanted Danzo. Her appointment was a last resort compromise. And she wasn't even their first choice, Jiraiya was. He was the preferred candidate because they all knew he wouldn't interfere in politics. Jiraiya refused, so they settled for Tsunade instead. And what happened when Tsunade overexerted herself and fell into a coma? Danzo took over as acting Hokage, and the major clans made it very clear how they felt about that. They didn't even bother assigning him a proper bodyguard unit. Of course, Danzo never trusted anyone, and in the end, he met a very decisive death at Sasuke's hands. No one in the village mourned him. Just like that, the incident passed, barely leaving a ripple. Kakashi's situation was slightly better. As the 4th Hokage's student, and someone who had good relationships with nearly every Jonin of his generation, they were, after all, former classmates, he still had some social capital. As for the old generation of Konoha's political elite, they'd been blown to smithereens by a single-tailed beast bomb from the 10 Tails. That explosion reshuffled the top power circle completely. And with Kakashi's connections, his path to the position of Hokage encountered the least resistance. Of course, there was another major reason. The 2 most powerful figures of the new generation, practically hailed as saviors, were his students. By the time Uzumaki Naruto became the 7th Hokage, the situation had changed even more dramatically. Every major faction at the top of the village. They were either his friends or brothers in arms. Even the most difficult clan, the Hyuga, had become his in-laws. On top of that, Naruto's own strength was beyond dispute. So when he stepped up, it was truly the will of the people. And it finally fulfilled his long-standing dream. But for Minato Namikaze, things were not so simple. The 3rd Hokage was still sitting firmly in power, and Minato's own teacher's generation was in their prime. To put it bluntly, Minato didn't stand a chance. It wasn't that he didn't dream of becoming Hokage. On the contrary, he dreamed of it constantly. But he knew full well that, at this moment, he had no real chance. Maybe in another 10 or 20 years, if the circumstances were right, the opportunity might finally come. Me, Hokage. Uchiha Kei let out a mocking smirk. No, I've no interest in becoming Hokage. And besides, this village would never let a Uchiha be Hokage, would it? Kei-kun. Minato's expression stiffened. This time, he couldn't even force a smile. I'm sorry. There are some things in the village. Captain Minato, you've been apologizing an awful lot today. Kei cut him off with a half-tilted head and a meaningful look. That's not like you. And I think you already understand exactly which Hokage I'm talking about. Minato fell silent. He stared directly at Kei, and for a moment, had no idea how to respond. He wanted to leave. Desperately. But Kei held the intel he needed. And if he stayed, Kei's questions would only grow more difficult to answer. To be honest, he wanted to scream it out. Yes, I do. I've dreamed of being Hokage for as long as I can remember. But he couldn't. Who knew why Kei was asking this? What was the purpose behind it? Even so, the deeply rooted longing for Hokage, buried deep in his heart, kept Minato frozen in place. So he stood there, staring at Kei, in silence. 5 full minutes passed. 5 minutes of unbroken silence and eye contact. And the longer it went, the more Kei felt like cursing out loud. Does this guy like me or something? The intense, scrutinizing gaze, the constant internal struggle flickering in Minato's eyes. It was unbearable. Fortunately, Kei was used to ambushing others. He had long since developed patience and timing. And this time, he outlasted Minato. Alright, Kei-kun. Minato finally let out a long sigh. Let's hear what you have to say. But on one condition. Go ahead. Kei smiled, visibly relieved. Even if you hadn't said it, I knew. If this talk doesn't work out, I'll forget it ever happened. We never spoke today. And the intel. After we talk, whether you agree or not, I'll give it to you. Chapter 117. Do you want to be Hokage? 2. Alright then, Kei-kun. Whatever it is you want to say, I'm all ears. With Uchiha Kei's assurance, Minato Namikaze finally relaxed a little. No matter what Kei wanted to talk about, no matter the outcome, he would still get the intel. And truth be told, Minato was intrigued. Deep in his heart, he did crave the chance to one day touch that lofty title, Hokage. If he truly had no such desire, he likely would have turned and walked away already. It was that tiny glimmer of hope that rooted Minato to the spot. And Kei's guarantee gave him just enough confidence to stay. Still, Minato found it almost amusing, the way Kei acted, as if he had him completely figured out and in the palm of his hand. Sure, Minato admitted to himself he'd taken the bait, but that didn't mean he had committed to anything yet. He let out a quiet sigh. Somewhere in this exchange, he'd come to recognize a flaw in himself. No matter how distant or unlikely the dream of Hokage seemed, he could never truly let it go. Even if it might take 10 or 20 more years, that didn't stop him from longing for it now. Captain Minato, Kei asked casually, on your way back to the village, did you hear any interesting news? Minato raised a brow. He could tell Kei was now ready for a serious conversation, and so he adjusted his tone accordingly. Interesting news. Minato frowned slightly, thinking through Kei's implications. You mean, Lord Orochimaru? Minato wasn't naive. He might not have had any real chance at Hokage, but he paid close attention to what went on behind the scenes. Take Orochimaru, for instance, there had been a shift in public sentiment surrounding him lately. Minato had noticed it. Still, he was wise enough not to take sides or get involved. Whether for self-preservation or simple detachment, Minato believed such matters would resolve themselves in time, with a result most could accept. But now Kei was bringing it up, and that alone made it feel off. Because Kei wasn't just anyone anymore. If this had been a couple of months ago, Minato might have brushed it aside. Back then, Uchiha Kei was just a marginal figure within his clan, someone few would take seriously. But now, Kei had awakened the three Tomo Sharingan and had risen to become the deputy chief of the Konoha military police. Not to mention, his strength was terrifying. He had just defeated and nearly killed Kitsuchi, one of Iwagakure's top-tier commanders. Yes, Kei nodded with a faint smile. Position defined power, and while Kei didn't particularly enjoy that reality, he also understood there was no escaping it. He could see what Minato was thinking, but he didn't mind. Yes, it's about Lord Orochimaru. I imagine Captain Minato already has a good grasp on what's happening. Somewhat, Minato answered carefully, his tone more measured now. But not in detail. I do believe Lord Orochimaru may have been misunderstood. Misunderstood? Kei chuckled and shrugged. Who knows? Maybe. Maybe not. But doesn't this seem like an opportunity, Captain Minato? Opportunity? Minato's expression remained calm, but inside, a storm was raging. Now he finally understood why Uchiha Kei had gone out of his way to keep him here and talk. The Uchiha clan wanted to push him onto the Hokage's seat. And with that realization, Minato already had an answer. No. A clear and decisive no. First of all, Minato didn't believe the Uchiha had the political power to make that happen. More importantly, even if they did, aligning with them would mean severing ties with his teacher. That thought alone was enough to make a bitter smile curl on his face, a rare expression that didn't suit him at all. Kei caught the shift immediately. Just one glance at Minato's face, and he understood what had just gone through the man's mind. He felt a wave of frustration. Damn the second Hokage and his faction, they had driven the Uchiha into becoming monsters. And damn the Uchiha too, for spiraling into madness and ruining their own name in the village. Kei-kun, I don't think we need to continue this conversation, Minato exhaled, his voice low but firm. I still have a chance at the Hokage position in the future. It might take years, but you don't want to break with your teacher, Lord Jiraiya, right? Kei interrupted, his voice calm, his gaze unwavering. You misunderstand something, Captain Minato. Us helping you won't require any open betrayal. The methods we use would be subtle, proper, and legitimate. The goal is to make the third Hokage come to the decision himself. Minato blinked. His thoughts were now a tangle of confusion. Is that so? He asked, his tone uncertain. Then why choose me? And who exactly is we? The answer's simple, really, Kei said, smiling faintly. I'm sure you already know part of it. The system left behind by the second Hokage has pushed the Uchiha clan further from the village. And within the clan, there are some calling for more aggressive action. If things reach a boiling point, no one can predict how bad it might get. He paused before continuing. Why you? Because you're Jiraiya's student. Because you're part of the Hokage's inner circle. Because you're a ninja of civilian origin, and the only one we believe would treat the Uchiha clan fairly and with true equality. Kei's words struck deep. Minato fell silent. He'd always dreamed of becoming Hokage, so naturally, He had studied the internal workings of the village. And yes, he had seen the cracks. The current leadership, the successors of the second Hokage's will, had consistently alienated the Uchiha. Minato had long thought that, should he ever become Hokage, he would try to fix that injustice. But now, hearing Kei's perspective, he realized he had been naive. If this system kept tightening the screws, the tension might someday explode. And when that day came, it wouldn't be the peaceful change Minato had hoped for. It would be bloodshed. At worst, a civil war that would leave both sides in ruins. While Minato was lost in thought, Kei gave a small, knowing smile. As for who, it's just two people. The chief of the military police, and his deputy. Fugaku, and you, Minato murmured, finally snapping out of it. For a long moment, he said nothing more. Then he sighed and looked Kei straight in the eyes, his voice calm but serious. Can you tell me your plans, your methods and intentions in full? Of course, Kei said with a growing smile. After all, we'll be partners from now on, won't we? The fish had taken the bait, and it was hook deep. 118. Do you want to be Hokage? Part 3. The fish had not only bitten the hook, it was now firmly caught, unable to break free. Uchiha Kei was like a devil gently luring someone into temptation, step by calculated step, until Minato Namikaze was walking to his rhythm. The most crucial part, Minato understood Kei's intentions. He could see the trap. But he couldn't reject it, not completely. Minato loved this village. He couldn't bear to see it descend into chaos. Besides, he'd been raised under Jiraiya's ideals of mutual understanding. He truly held no prejudice against the Uchiha clan. And then, of course, there was his dream, his deepest, long-cherished hope, to become Hokage. It was something he had shared with his wife. It was the vision he held dearest. So now, when that dream aligned with his principles, when it could lead to the village's better future, how could he resist? Then there were the two names Kei had revealed, Uchiha Fugaku and Uchiha Kei. Minato was familiar with Fugaku. The man had been his senior back in the academy. And Fugaku's wife, Makoto, had been his classmate, who also happened to be best friends with Minato's own wife, Kushina. Their families had been in contact often. So Minato had a good sense of Fugaku's values. Even though they hadn't met in a while, Minato trusted that certain things about people didn't change so easily. As for Kei, Minato found him harder to read. But one thing was certain, this boy was sharp. A genius. And someone deeply integrated with the village. From what he'd heard through Kakashi, the two shared a close bond. And the progress Kakashi had made lately hadn't gone unnoticed, it was outstanding. That transformation had a lot to do with Kei's influence. Kakashi was even beginning to forge his own path, independent of anyone else's legacy. To help a fellow ninja discover a path perfectly suited.
To them, that was no small feat. That was something a teacher would do. And Kei had good relationships with other young ninjas too. Not to mention during that last mission, Kei had rescued many prisoners of war. Though in the end, only Yamanaka Masato survived, the man had nothing but glowing praise for Kei. And it wasn't just Masato. Any ninja on the front lines who had benefited from Kei's actions looked at him with newfound respect. To be honest, Kei said calmly after a long breath, the clan head and I both believe. We cannot accept another Hokage molded by the second Hokage's ideology. You are the best choice. And to make sure you have a real shot, we've taken steps. Especially now that Orochimaru has encountered some issues. You should speak more respectfully, Kei-kun. Minato sighed, before asking, what exactly have you done? And, did Lord Orochimaru truly do something so unforgivable? Maybe he did. Maybe he didn't. It doesn't really matter, Kei replied coolly. But if you insist on an answer, I'll say this, he probably did. Probably. Minato narrowed his eyes. But he was smart, and he picked up on the implication quickly. It wasn't that he couldn't have figured this out himself. Like Fugaku, Minato had simply assumed he stood no real chance at becoming Hokage, so he hadn't paid close attention. But now, with Kei's framing, the inconsistencies in the situation were glaring. Could the leading Hokage candidate really be embroiled in a scandal without the third Hokage intervening? Unlikely. More likely was that Hiruzen had tried something, but it didn't work. That meant two possibilities. 1. Orochimaru really was guilty. 2. Someone powerful had helped fan the flames behind the scenes. And just like that, Minato saw the
truth. Just as Kei had intended. In the end, it didn't matter whether Orochimaru was truly guilty. No one would let a Hokage candidate carry such a taint. Not in a time of crisis. What did matter was this. It was an opportunity. A rare, golden opportunity. One that could put Minato on the very throne he dreamed of. Kei-kun, Minato swallowed his rising excitement. What exactly are your plans, or rather, what have you already done? It's simple, Kei said with a small smile. The rift between our clan and the village isn't just about the third Hokage or those still clinging to the second's ideology. The Uchiha themselves are part of the problem. So I spoke with the clan head. We agreed, it's time to clean house. To change how the village sees the Uchiha. Clean house. Minato's eyes widened, a flicker of tension running through him. You mean, Uchiha you? That was your doing. It was, Kei replied flatly, nodding. He was one of the hardliners. On the surface, he claimed to be fighting for the clan. But in reality, he was sabotaging any hope of integration, ruining our image. So I removed him. At the right place, at the right time. Upon hearing Uchiha Kei's calm voice, Minato Namikaze suddenly felt a chill crawl down his spine. That so-called, right place at the right time. Did it mean Kei had framed Orochimaru? The incident with Uchiha Yu had erupted right after Orochimaru's scandal broke out, and it had taken place not far from the police department. Everything about the scene had been designed to paint a specific picture. That the attacker was someone incredibly powerful, someone who could operate right under the Uchiha's nose with impunity. And who, recently, fit that image better than Orochimaru, whose reputation had already taken a nosedive. Even if no one dared say it aloud, the seeds of suspicion would have already been planted in their hearts. But more than that, Minato suddenly realized. This incident may have just backfired on the very person Kei had hinted at earlier. The one pulling strings from the shadows. If the third Hokage had started putting pieces together, he might now suspect that his hidden ally was the one playing dirty behind the scenes. Minato looked at Kei, stunned. This boy, he wasn't just dangerous. He wasn't a viper lurking in the dark, waiting to strike. He was a hunter. A master strategist. There's really no need to look at me like that, Captain Minato, Kei suddenly sighed, his voice tinged with something almost like regret. If not for survival, who would ever choose to walk this kind of path? Minato stood there, silent for a long time. In the end, he could only sigh in resignation. Everything Kei had said made sense. Under the pressure from the village and internal strife within the Uchiha clan, something terrible had indeed seemed inevitable. If they resisted, the village could plunge into civil unrest. If they gave in, the Uchiha could vanish from history. What Kei and Fugaku had orchestrated. In the end, it was all about survival. And as for the person they'd chosen to support, it really could only be him. P.S. Yes, the protagonist does sometimes play tricks or resort to scheming. But aside from the time Minato caught him off guard, every other move he's made has been well planned, with substantial benefits in mind. Even that ambush by Minato. It ultimately awakened his Mangekyo Sharingan. Minato isn't as naive as Naruto, but he's carried the dream of becoming Hokage since childhood. And in a way, that dream is his one small weakness. The protagonist simply identified that weakness, amplified it, and reshaped what seemed impossible into something inevitable, all for the sake of greater gains. Chapter 119. Do you want to be Hokage? Part 4. And beyond that, now that he'd thought everything through, Minato Namikaze sat down at last. His posture was calm, his expression relaxed, as if he had finally come to terms with everything Uchiha Kei had said. Across from him, Kei allowed a small smile to tug at the corners of his mouth. That simple action, Minato sitting down, had said it all. He'd accepted Kei's proposal. He hadn't given a full commitment yet, true. But did Uchiha Kei ever let a fish off the hook after it had been this deep? Of course not. He never allowed that to happen. To avoid stirring up too much trouble in the village, Kei began again, we won't be purging too many people. As he spoke, he was calculating in his head, just how much should he reveal. In the end, he made up his mind. Go all in. Lay his cards out on the table. It was a risky move. Revealing too much meant giving others a clear view of your bottom line. And once people knew where your limits were, they could use that to push back, or worse, negotiate you down. But there was an upside. It conveyed honesty and trust, making it easier to build rapport. Kei had studied a bit of negotiation theory back in his previous life at university. He never expected those lessons would end up useful in a world of ninjas, but here he was, putting them to work. We'll remove the most problematic ones, those hard-headed types as stubborn as stone. His voice was calm, as though he were discussing the weather. The rest, we'll give them a choice, either integrate into the larger Konoha family, or become outsiders, and lose everything, even their lives. That phrase, integrate into the Konoha family, made Kei want to gag. But when dealing with someone like Minato, he knew exactly which phrases needed to be said. Minato was loyal to Konoha, though not blindly loyal to the third Hokage. As such, if the Uchiha clan wished to earn his support when he became Hokage, they had to show the will to cooperate. No leader wanted a rogue clan constantly bucking authority, no matter how well-meaning. Even if Minato wanted to help, it would be meaningless if the Uchiha clan refused to meet him halfway. A sound idea, Minato nodded after thinking for a moment. Less bloodshed is always the better path. And after that, despite having inherited Jiraiya's ideals, Minato was no naive idealist. He understood that true reform sometimes required a controlled application of force. After that, Kei continued, the clan head will restructure the Konoha military police. We'll weed out certain individuals and enforce stricter conduct during missions. He shrugged slightly, voice casual. You know how it is. Some of them have gone too far. To fill the vacant spots, we plan to recruit from other minor clans, and even from among the civilian shinobi. Minato nodded thoughtfully. It was clear now. Both Kei and Fugaku had not only committed to this plan, they had put serious thought into it. The military police had long been seen as a blight on the village. Civilians and lower-ranking ninja resented them deeply, especially because of their harsh methods and arrogant behavior. If the police department underwent reform, if its composition changed, then the Uchiha's public image could dramatically improve. And finally, we turn inward. Kei didn't bother to guess what Minato was thinking. He kept speaking in his usual steady tone. The Uchiha clan has remained too isolated from the rest of Konoha. People like me, who were born on the margins, are less affected, but some others. He paused for a moment before continuing. We need to suppress, or even eliminate, that isolationist mentality. We must find a way to change the fact that the Uchiha refused to integrate into the village. This was everything Uchiha Kei and Fugaku had planned. Kei had laid it all out, he had nothing left to hold back. These countermeasures were designed to tie the Uchiha clan firmly to the village's chariot. Kei could already imagine how many of the so-called elders would jump out in protest once the plan was set into motion. Accusations like, traitor to the Uchiha, and, destroyer of the clan's last pride, would no doubt be hurled at both him and Fugaku. But, did Kei care? Not in the slightest. For one, Fugaku would be the one taking most of the heat up front. And two, what the Uchiha became in the future wasn't Kei's problem. He had no intention of being sacrificed in some self-righteous power struggle between paranoid madmen and deluded zealots. No matter how the Uchiha changed, Uchiha Kei would still be Uchiha Kei. The real sinner wasn't him, it was Fugaku. And who knows, a few decades down the line, maybe the descendants of the clan would even thank them. Not that Kei cared, future gratitude or present condemnation, it was all meaningless to him. All he wanted was for his plan to succeed. All he cared about was surviving. He gazed silently at Minato. And Minato, for his part, stared back, lost in thought. Your plan is impressive, Minato finally said. In fact, it seems like you don't even need me to prevent a conflict between the Uchiha and the village. Kei chuckled lightly, unconcerned. But who wants to live with a sword hanging over their head? He said casually. Besides, these changes we're making, they could serve as a great boost to your momentum once you take office. A gift, you might say. Something to strengthen your position. He tilted his head slightly. Do you really believe, whether now or in the future, that you'll be free to do whatever you want once you're Hokage? You'll need to prove yourself on certain fronts. Kei-kun, Minato interrupted sharply, his expression hardening. I'd appreciate it if you didn't speak so lightly about the third Hokage. Though deep down he suspected Kei wasn't wrong, Minato didn't want to dwell on it. And more importantly, you speak as if my victory is guaranteed. But what if I fail? What happens to your plan then? Kei offered a reassuring smile. You need our support, and we need your cooperation. Come on, Kei thought to himself, you're the only viable option. Not just for the Uchiha, but for Hiruzen as well. Of course, he didn't say that out loud. Instead, he tilted his head again and spoke calmly. We've made preparations for that scenario, too. We'll be reaching out to the smaller clans and civilian shinobi, supporting and funding them to create a shared interest alliance. If you succeed, this becomes one of your greatest assets. A foundation of support for your candidacy. And if you fail, then this alliance becomes our final line of defense. With that, Kei fell silent. He had said everything that needed saying, laid out every angle, every justification. Now, all that remained was Minato's answer. And though Kei was confident Minato had already agreed in his heart, he kept up appearances, a mix of hope and tension on his face. Fortunately, Minato seemed to have come to a decision. His eyes hardened with resolve, exactly the look Kei had hoped for. Looks like I don't have much of a choice, do I? Minato said, rising to his feet. There are still plenty of details to iron out. I'll need to speak with Fugaku. Of course. Kei stood up as well. The clan head is eagerly awaiting your arrival. Then let's work well together, Kei-kun. Looking forward to it, Minato-kun. // Chapter 120. I support you. As Minato's figure disappeared into the distance, a faint smile tugged at the corners of Uchiha Kei's lips. The fish had finally entered the trap. Minato was the fish, and Kei's carefully orchestrated plan was the trap. Kei had fully exploited Minato's ideals and aspirations, weaving a snare based on his knowledge of the future. A trap so subtle, so precise, that Minato walked right into it step by step without ever realizing it. And most importantly, Kei hadn't lied. Every word he said had been true. Both he and Fugaku would follow through. They would stabilize the Uchiha clan, guide it toward peaceful integration with Konoha. They'd even lend Minato political support, by quietly undermining his rivals. Sure, Minato might find such tactics distasteful. But he wouldn't be involved directly, and technically, it wouldn't be tied to him at all. If blame fell, it would land squarely on Orochimaru, or perhaps some shadowy figure whose existence couldn't even be confirmed. And once Hiruzen voiced his concerns, during the Daimyo Council, that Orochimaru's ambition and inner darkness made him unfit for the Hokage position. Kei's promise to Minato would be as good as fulfilled. Minato would attribute his victory to the silent backing of the Uchiha. After he took office, all he needed to do was schedule a meeting with Fugaku. Then, after a few months, Fugaku would announce the clan's reform measures. Everything would fall perfectly into place. Though in truth, even without the Uchiha's help, you were destined to become the fourth Hokage, Kei mused inwardly. But I need you to believe that it was because of your alliance with us that you earned this position. There was no denying it. Having foreknowledge of the future and using it to influence the present felt incredibly satisfying. What felt even better was tightening the relationship between the Uchiha and the future fourth Hokage. // Meanwhile, Minato had already returned to the Konoha encampment in a flash. But his mind was still racing. He was no fool. From that conversation alone, he had pieced together most of what was really going on. Orochimaru, once the frontrunner, had taken a major hit due to public opinion. Even if it hadn't ruined him entirely, the Uchiha's quiet interference had left a mark. As for his teacher, Jiraiya, he'd never shown any interest in becoming Hokage. In fact, Minato was pretty sure the man would rather sneak around bathhouses and write those lewd novels than sit behind a desk at Hokage's office. Tsunade had long since left Konoha. She wasn't even on the list of potential candidates this time. That left Minato as the ideal choice. He had the strength. He had the honor. He was even teammates with the current generation's Ino Shikacho. And he was Jiraiya's student. Politically, he had the perfect pedigree. The only knock against him was his youth and lack of political experience. But those very weaknesses might be used against him. Let's just hope things don't turn ugly, Minato thought, his brows furrowed. He didn't quite know how to process everything Kei had told him. Because Kei wasn't just smart. He was frighteningly insightful, and strong. Strong enough that, given time, he might become a truly great ninja. Or a dangerously unpredictable one. Sighing, Minato made his way to Jiraiya's quarters. He was lucky. This time, the old man hadn't wandered off somewhere. That saved Minato a good deal of time. Yo, Minato, you're back, Jiraiya called out with a grin as his student stepped through the door. Looks like you've leveled up again. How's Kohei doing? What kind of mess did they get into? Minato forced a smile. Fukuhiko-san's already been taken to the medics, he's injured. As for their mission, well, it's not so much a crisis as it is an opportunity. Although the opposing side was led by Kitsuchi, so. Whoa, what are you even talking about? Jiraiya interrupted, rubbing his head. Opportunities. Crisis. You feeling okay? Or did you see some young girl bathing in the woods and now you're overwhelmed with guilt? Minato stared blankly at his teacher as Jiraiya's expression turned suddenly sleazy. A bead of sweat slid down Minato's temple. Shaking his head quickly, he clarified. No, nothing like that, sensei. Here's what happened. Fukuhiko-san encountered some Iwa nin opposed to the peace talks, led by Kitsuchi. But the situation's more complicated than that. As Minato spoke, his expression dimmed slightly. Before leaving, he had already learned the contents of the intelligence Uchiha Kei had provided. While that information gave him the confidence and leverage he needed to gain valuable political experience during the upcoming negotiations. Kei's first gift to him, no less. He still felt uneasy thinking about the Iwa nin's methods. Rationally, he understood it was probably the best course of action. But emotionally, he wasn't sure he could be so decisive if he were sitting in the Hokage's seat. Is that so? Jiraiya fell silent after hearing Minato's explanation. After a long pause, he finally sighed and gave Minato a reassuring pat on the shoulder. You've done well, Minato. And so has that brat, Uchiha Kei. His intelligence was invaluable. Minato hesitated for a moment, then spoke. Sensei, I know that logically speaking, Iwa's decision wasn't wrong. But emotionally, it just feels wrong. Jiraiya finished, reading his student's heart with a faint shake of his head. That's war, Minato. Endless war has twisted reason into routine. Hatred and national interests have become immovable walls. And those walls grow taller with every battle and every grab for power. Minato opened his mouth, then paused, before asking a question that even he knew sounded childish. Is there really no way to change that? It was a naive question. Because between nations and villages, everything came down to cold, hard interests. The secret orders from Iwa's leadership might have been brutal. But in times of war, such decisions were not only strategic, they were necessary. Minato sighed. He didn't expect a real answer from his teacher. But to his surprise, Jiraiya spoke up. Jiraiya said, his face growing unusually serious. When people can truly communicate with one another, maybe then, some of that hatred can finally be erased. Through communication, Minato repeated, unsure what to say. Yes, Jiraiya nodded. But to speak to others, to bring about change, you need the right position. For example, Hokage. Hokage, Minato echoed softly, stunned. He had just agreed to work with the Uchiha. And now, here was Jiraiya speaking of the very same path. To become Hokage. Only from that seat could he truly promote understanding between people. Wasn't that his belief all along? Perhaps the Uchiha had seen that belief in him, too. Believed in the way he viewed them. And that's why they were willing to bet everything on him. With that thought, a strange calm washed over Minato. He looked at his teacher and suddenly broke into his trademark bright, easy smile. Jiraiya-sensei, he said with cheerful resolve. I've made up my mind. I want to run for Hokage. Jiraiya grinned and nodded. Good. You have my support. I mean, the fourth Hokage, Minato clarified. No problem, Jiraiya said, voice full of warmth. I support you, now and always. Chapter 121, Hidden Thoughts. With Jiraiya's support, Minato Namikaze immediately felt a weight lifted off his shoulders. Yet the moment he thought about agreeing to cooperate with Uchiha Kei, an even heavier pressure settled back onto him. But pressure could also be motivation. Minato already understood exactly what he needed to do. First, he would thoroughly organize the intelligence Kei had obtained from Onoki and make sure this negotiation ended smoothly. This time, Minato intended to be more assertive. With this information backing him, he hoped to achieve greater results, and secure more political capital for himself. As for exactly how Minato planned to do that, it was no longer Uchiha Kei's concern. Kei was still deep in the land of grass, searching for any trace of the hidden mist forces. Fukuhiko Kohei had truly been unfortunate. He could be described as someone who died before his mission even began. Though in a sense, his luck hadn't been the worst, at least he was still alive. His departure left Kei's squad one man short, but somehow, that absence seemed to make the team even more coordinated. Back when they were operating behind Iwagakure lines, it had been the same 5 of them together, with Kei as the squad leader. I never thought we'd end up right back where we started, Kakashi said, glancing at the familiar faces around him with a wry smile. You're our captain again, and we're the same old teammates. Is that so bad? Kei shrugged indifferently. At least we all know each other. Besides, compared to before, we have 2 more skilled swordsmen, and our strength is on a completely different level. That was true. Now, none of them were injured. Their chakra reserves were full. They had even routed and killed a significant number of stone ninja in direct combat. Their mood was reasonably good. Although they still had to scour the heart of the land of grass for any hidden mist shinobi, staying optimistic was certainly better than brooding in frustration. But searching was no easy task, especially in this dense forest. A single oversight could mean missing critical clues. Even having a Hyuga and an Uchiha among them wasn't a perfect solution. Kei couldn't keep his Sharingan active at all times. Though he could withstand the drain, he had no intention of wasting chakra needlessly. Hyuga Ayaka felt the same way. Maintaining the Byakugan constantly consumed vast energy. Even if the Byakugan's detection abilities were excellent, nothing was ever completely foolproof. After all, human attention was finite. No one could truly maintain 360-degree awareness without exhausting themselves. So, should we split up to search? After 2 full days of fruitless searching together, Kei finally sighed and proposed the idea. This is stones
territory, Ayaka said, her expression wary as she looked at him. If we split up, we'll be inviting trouble. And if someone's unlucky enough to run into Mist Ninja, they'll be picked off easily. First of all, this is the land of grass, not the land of earth, and certainly not the land of water, Kei countered, shaking his head. Second, we've been searching together all this time, relying entirely on Byakugan. We've missed countless details, and our efficiency and thoroughness are terrible. If we keep this up, who knows how long it'll take to find anything. His tone was so firm that for a moment, Ayaka wondered if he had some ulterior motive. But she couldn't deny that he was right. Their search was painfully slow and inefficient. So in the end, she fell silent. She was already sick to death of this damned land of grass. Probably, the others felt the same. They could sense that the war was drawing to a close. But the nearer the end came, the more dangerous and troublesome every mission became. It wasn't as if Kei liked this place either. In fact, he'd grown tired of all the little nations surrounding the Land of Fire. He had fought battles in nearly all of them. But compared to them, he thought, the ordinary people who lived in these small countries must have been the ones who suffered the most. The great nations were all separated by these small countries, and in most cases, wars between the great powers rarely spilled into their own homelands. Under such circumstances, these smaller nations inevitably became the perfect buffer zones, and the true battlefields. The 5 great nations and their hidden villages were not exactly known for their compassion. No matter how peaceful and prosperous life looked inside their villages, no matter how benevolent
their leaders appeared, it was all mostly just a facade for internal consumption. When it came to dealings beyond their borders, they showed no such courtesy. Nearly every small country had been turned into a battleground for the 5 great nations, and the devastation they wrought here was almost unimaginable. Families torn apart, countless people displaced, tragedy had long since become routine. And the war orphans, they were prime resources that the great nations competed to acquire. After all, any one of those children could grow up to become a capable shinobi. I agree with the captain, Kakashi spoke up first. Our efficiency is far too low like this. We should split up. As long as everyone carries a signal flare, we'll be fine. I'll follow the captain's orders, Nohara Rin said after glancing at Kakashi. She thought for a moment, then nodded. Seconded. Amai Kenta was still smiling as always, looking exactly the same as he had a month or 2 ago. Hyuga Ayaka swept her gaze over the others. When her eyes fell on Amai Kenta, a trace of sarcasm tugged at her lips. But she didn't say anything, nor did she bother to remind Amai about the possibility that Uchiha Kei had other motives. She simply nodded indifferently. In the end, she agreed to Kei's proposal as well. She figured as long as she was careful, nothing would happen. And the sooner this mission was over, the sooner she could leave this wretched place behind. All right, then, since everyone agrees. Kei looked around at them. Kakashi, you'll go with Rin. She's our medical ninja, so take good care of her. You two will handle the west. Kenta, you head east. Ayaka, you take the north. I'll scout the south. Understood. Once Kei issued the orders, he immediately turned and started walking in his assigned direction. The others exchanged glances, then set off one by one. With signal flares on hand, as long as they weren't too far apart, they'd be able to see each other's distress calls. Still, they all knew that unless it was absolutely necessary, they shouldn't use them. Because the moment those flares went up, the enemy would see them too, whether it was Stone Ninja or Mist Ninja. Moving quietly through the trees, Kei kept an eye on the signs and traces around him as he advanced. Naturally, he didn't bother activating his Sharingan. He saw no point. After all, the reason the mist had infiltrated this area in the first place was to target Kakashi and Rin, or rather, to create the conditions for Obito to awaken his Sharingan. What Kei needed to do now was wait. He had deliberately chosen a direction not too far from Kakashi, and had purposefully sent Hyuga Ayaka farther away. He didn't want that woman interfering. As for Ayaka herself, Kei had indeed considered eliminating her, but weighing all factors, he decided to hold back, for now. Even if he were to act, he would need the right time, the right place, and the right circumstances. End of chapter. Chapter 122, Hyuga Ayaka. Hyuga Ayaka moved in the opposite direction from where Uchiha Kei had gone. Technically, this was called a recon mission. But to her, retreat felt like a much more accurate description. Her sharp instincts had picked up something faint yet unmistakable, a trace of malice hidden beneath Kei's calm expression. And that single thread of hostility made her recall a lot of things she'd rather forget. In extreme situations, Ayaka would gamble with her life. But under normal circumstances, she preferred to eliminate every uncertain factor. Unfortunately, Uchiha Kei was one factor she couldn't quite eliminate. When it came to cunning, Ayaka wasn't afraid of him. In terms of methods, she didn't believe she was any less capable. But if it came down to a head-on fight, she wasn't confident. Maybe if she had a few more years to grow, she'd be able to face him without hesitation. She believed in her potential, believed her strength would eventually blossom. But facing a fully awakened three-tomo Sharingan wielder, and someone as ruthless and manipulative as Kei, Ayaka wasn't foolish enough to think she had the upper hand. She envied Uchiha Kei, not just his sudden rise in strength, but also something far more precious, freedom. Ayaka couldn't even remember when the markings had first appeared on her forehead. But as she grew older, she came to understand what they meant. It was a brand of servitude, a mark of enslavement. It symbolized the loss of her freedom. As a child, she had dreamed of breaking free through sheer effort and excellence. But that dream shattered the moment she applied for early graduation with top scores. And realized that beyond the peaceful walls of the academy was the hellscape of real battle. The Shinobi Academy had been her only sanctuary. Once she left it, there was only the blood-soaked battlefield. Yet Hyuga Ayaka didn't give up. If anything, she became more focused, more ruthless. The war changed her. Once, she had been a bright, optimistic girl, hopeful and innocent. Now, she was cold, calculating, and filled with silent ambition. She had watched teammates die with her own eyes. All she could do was avenge them. Nothing else could be reclaimed. That moment taught her a brutal truth. Only the living have a future. Only by surviving could she pursue her dream. And her dream was simple. To reclaim her freedom. To become a bird that could soar across the sky, unbound. She worked tirelessly toward that goal. Over the years, her strength had grown, and she'd become more adept at hiding her true self. But she knew, it still wasn't enough. She had to push harder. Fight harder. Be sharper. The battlefield had taught her countless lessons. She'd survived where many others hadn't. So many teammates had come and gone that she had grown numb to it. Now she had a new squad. Uchiha Kei, someone from a clan that stood shoulder to shoulder with the Hyuga in reputation. In some circles, the Uchiha were even held in higher regard. Looking into his record, Ayaka had guessed he might be the same kind of person as her. Quiet, watchful, dangerous. Besides him, there was a Mai Kenta. Ayaka didn't concern herself with Kenta. A civilian-born shinobi, no matter how deep he tried to hide his thoughts, would always be just that, a civilian. But Uchiha Kei was different. As someone from a noble clan, even if he was a so-called fringe member, Ayaka didn't dare underestimate him. At first, she had looked down on Kei a little. Despite his strength, he hadn't awakened his bloodline limit. And it bothered her, a lot, that someone so similar to her in nature was put in charge as team leader. She genuinely worried that he'd get consumed by some misguided sense of justice or pride and drag them all down in a blaze of reckless idealism. But reality proved otherwise. Kei was calm. He was composed. And above all, he was cruel. His fear of death was no less than her own, perhaps even greater. He was the kind of person who would sacrifice everything and everyone if it meant ensuring his own survival. And on top of that, he was brilliant. In the most extreme circumstances, he managed to come up with a plan to save himself. In that short window of chaos, he figured out the objective of Namikaze's squad. Even with death staring him down, he pieced together the Iwa Nin's tactical setup. And if that wasn't enough, he awakened the Sharingan. Not just the first stage, but the 3-Tomo Sharingan, right off the bat. Hyuga Ayaka had studied the Uchiha clan before. Their bloodline limit was notorious, fickle, even strange. Whether or not one awakened the Sharingan seemed to depend entirely on fate. Not awakening it didn't necessarily make an Uchiha weak. But once it did awaken, their strength surged dramatically. A genin with a fully awakened 3-Tomo Sharingan could potentially go toe-to-toe with a Jonin. Of course, that didn't guarantee victory. Real combat experience, tactical skill, chakra reserves, those all still mattered. But the mere possibility of such a matchup said everything. Even before unlocking his Sharingan, Uchiha Kei had already been formidable. Ayaka never thought he was stronger than her, but with his Sharingan activated, there was no doubt, he was a real threat. That alone made Ayaka wary. But what truly gnawed at her was jealousy. Kei was a free bird. And she was not. Look at how fast he rose in Konoha. After returning from the front lines, he was promoted to Jonin. Then, right before this mission, he was appointed deputy chief of the military police. That title said everything about how much freedom he truly had. Ayaka didn't envy his rank or title. To her, being a Jonin or deputy chief was meaningless. What she envied was his freedom. But that very title, deputy chief of the police force, now made her even more uneasy. Because it meant that Kei's presence here, in the middle of a battlefield, was no accident. Someone like that wouldn't come here unless they had a very clear goal. Sure, Ayaka could rationalize it as the mission being critical. Or that Kei had personal motives. But knowing the kind of person Kei was, she refused to believe he was doing this for the sake of the village. And if he had another agenda, was it possible, just maybe, that his objective included eliminating someone like her, someone who knew too much and was bound by shackles? In war, you always plan for the worst. That was one of the first lessons Ayaka had learned. Even if it turned out to be nothing, she had to assume the worst. She had to prepare for it. Let's hope not, she muttered with a soft sigh. We've only ever clashed within the rules, but if he decides to break them, I'll be in real trouble. That thought circled in her mind. Her only comfort right now was that Kei seemed to be sticking to the plan. Heading in the direction he claimed he'd scout. Relieved, Ayaka finally let herself slow down. Truth be told, she didn't really care about finding any hidden mist nin. If she did, she wouldn't have suggested regrouping in the first place. Safety was the bigger concern. As she relaxed and deactivated her Byakugan, she took a few quiet steps forward. Only to realize she'd just spotted some tracks. Tracks that her Byakugan had completely missed. Chapter 123, Tactics. What is it you people actually want? A furious roar rang out from within a white tent, pitched at the border where Konoha and Iwa forces had drawn their lines. At that moment, while Uchiha Kei and his team were busy scouting Mist Nin, an entirely different kind of battle was unfolding, one of diplomacy. Namikaze Minato sat calmly in his seat, unshaken by the outburst of the Iwa shinobi standing before him. He looked at the man, face twisted in anger, and suddenly found him amusing. The performance was almost theatrical. Over the past few days, Minato had watched this same routine play out countless times. One moment the man would rage and slam the table. The next, he'd awkwardly say he needed to consult the Tsuchikage. And sometimes, he'd even adopt a look of reluctant concession, pretending Konoha was getting the better deal, before dragging the talks out again. In short, this man had become a master of diplomatic theatrics. If there were an award for best performance in a war negotiation, Ikeda Takeshi would have been a frontrunner. Had Konoha's negotiation team not received inside intel, thanks to Uchiha Kei, about Iwa's true bottom line, they might have actually been forced to make concessions. They didn't trust this man's words. But neither could they dismiss everything he said, because, without knowing Iwa's real stance, they couldn't risk a miscalculation. They used his expressions, his tone, even the subtlest shifts in behavior to read between the lines and gauge Iwa's true position. But now, things had changed. We've already made our demands very clear. Minato spoke with steady composure, his gaze unwavering as he looked at Ikeda Takeshi, this clever, silver-tongued Iowa shinobi who, though not from any major clan, had been entrusted with full negotiating authority. Ha! Ikeda let out a derisive laugh, as if pushed past the point of patience. That enormous compensation sum, you think we're idiots? Let me make it clear, we don't have that kind of money. We're still fighting Kumo. How could we possibly come up with such a large amount? Minato didn't flinch. That's not our concern, he replied evenly, tone cool and detached. How you come up with it is up to you. Ikeda frowned deeply, his frustration evident. He couldn't figure out Minato's posture, why this newcomer had so confidently taken control of the talks. But one thing was certain. Minato's presence alone had become a massive psychological weapon against Iwa. No one could forget the battlefield legend of the yellow flash, that golden blur that moved like a phantom, cutting down 50 Iowa shinobi in the blink of an eye. Still, Ikeda didn't understand something. Why was this man now leading the negotiations? Why had someone who rose so quickly suddenly taken over the diplomatic front as well? Just days ago, it was clearly Nara Shikaku who had been handling all the negotiations. But now, he was simply sitting to the side, like a spectator watching a play. Has Nara Jonin also agreed to this arrangement? Ikeda Takeshi suddenly turned toward him and asked, "You're letting an outsider take over the talks? Is it that your Hokage no longer trusts you? Or is it that Namikaze, Jiraiya's disciple, pressured you into giving up the lead?" "You can stop trying to test my stance," Shikaku replied with a sigh. "And your attempts at sowing discord aren't exactly subtle." His voice was calm and steady, utterly unfazed. "I can tell you plainly, the authority to lead these talks was given to Minato by me. I believe he's the right person to handle this phase of the negotiation." Shikaku's words were firm, confident, and entirely without resentment. This threw Ikeda off for a moment, he hadn't expected such transparency. The talks between Iwa and Konoha had already dragged on for days. What remained unresolved was the compensation clause. Ikeda was fully aware that Konoha's demands weren't exactly excessive. In fact, by most standards, they were reasonable. One could even argue Iwa was still coming out ahead. But something about the terms made him suspect that Konoha was weaker than they let on, that they lacked the decisiveness of a true victor. That led Ikeda to believe there was room to push back. After all, Konoha had endured all 3 great ninja wars. By this point, they had to be running on fumes. Especially before facing Iwa, they'd been fighting a 2-front war, battling both Kumo and Suna at the same time. Truth be told, Ikeda still held some resentment toward their own Tsuchikage. Why did the 3rd Tsuchikage insist on launching a sneak attack on the Raikage? That reckless move caused Kumo, furious and bent on revenge, to immediately retreat and consolidate their forces, pulling out of the war with Konoha. That gave Konoha just enough breathing room to crush Suna, and then turn their full force on Iwa. While the intention may have been to destabilize Kumo and win greater spoils, it had backfired. Kumo's quick withdrawal had given Konoha the upper hand. And although Konoha's battle with Suna had been bloody and intense, without Kumo pressing from the rear, they had been able to mobilize their remaining strength to defeat Iwa. Ikeda could only feel frustrated by how things had turned out, but even so, he still firmly believed Konoha was spent. If he could just hold out, they would crumble first. The current offer might satisfy the Tsuchikage, but not him. As an Iwa negotiator, it was his duty to push for more, to guard against Konoha overreaching, and to extract as much advantage as possible. It seems your side doesn't truly wish to negotiate, Ikeda finally said, rising to his feet. His tone had changed, no longer angry, but eerily calm. Very well, then, let's both take an hour to cool off. We can resume the talks afterward. Minato stood as well, his tone just as neutral. Agreed. But allow me to share a piece of information with you before you go. He looked directly into Ikeda's eyes. Konoha's forces have fully regrouped. In 5 minutes, we'll be entering your encampment. Combat duration: 30 minutes. Ikeda's expression changed instantly. You're trying to force this into a fight. If that's your intention, then just say it outright. You think we're afraid of Konoha? The room suddenly shifted. Every Iowa ninja present stood up, tension crackling in the air. But beneath the bravado, a quiet dread settled in. After all, Namikaze Minato wasn't just anyone. His name was printed right there in the Iowa Combat Manual, marked with a chilling warning. Greater than, if encountered, abandon the mission. Against this man, most Iowa shinobi harbored an instinctive fear. He was practically synonymous with death itself. Jonin Ikeda, Minato said calmly, we've already shown you more than enough good faith. For days now, we've given you time and space to deliberate. But you've pushed too far. You Konoha shinobi are just too greedy. Ikeda snarled, his voice rising. If you really want to fight, fine. But don't pretend you're fighting for peace. His words rang with conviction, at least on the surface. He sounded like a man who genuinely desired peace. But Minato simply sighed and looked at him with an amused expression. How is the Tsuchikage's son, Jonin Kitsuchi, doing? What? Ikeda blinked, and his face immediately went pale. Kitsuchi had returned to the Iowa camp severely injured and unconscious. No one knew what exactly had happened, only that his arm was severed, his body nearly bled dry, and he still hadn't regained consciousness. Ah, yes, that Kitsuchi, Minato said softly, his eyes boring into Ikeda's. Some Iowa radicals attacked Konoha shinobi during this ceasefire. Naturally, we retaliated. And through a few methods, we learned some very interesting things, like how your Tsuchikage has already issued secret orders, and how these radicals were actually. Nonsense. Ikeda roared, cutting Minato off. But in that instant, he noticed the Iowa shinobi around him, those assigned to protect him, were no longer looking at him the same way. And then he noticed something else. His back was soaked with cold sweat. Chapter 124, The Mist Ninja Camp. This should be the place. Uchiha Kei and the four others lay quietly hidden atop a ridge, eyes locked onto the small encampment below. After some careful scouting, they were nearly certain they'd found the right location. After uncovering a lead, Hyuga Ayaka had immediately gone to find Amai Kenta. Not only was Kenta closer, but she also had no intention of meeting Uchiha Kei on her own. Kenta hadn't thought much of it at the time. Wearing his usual easygoing smile, he followed Ayaka straight to Kei and relayed the information she'd discovered. Kei hadn't expected Ayaka to come through so quickly, but since she had, there was no harm in checking it out. That was, until Kei suggested they get Kakashi involved, an idea Ayaka firmly rejected. Her reasoning was, there are quite a few enemies in that camp. We should proceed more cautiously. But beneath that, she also hinted, subtly, but unmistakably, that this is our squad's discovery. If anyone was going in, it should be them. Kei couldn't help but smirk coldly at that. In his mind, there was a much simpler explanation, she was afraid. Afraid that if something went wrong, and Kei decided to turn on her, Kakashi might intervene, and then she'd be in real trouble. Acting all high and righteous. You think everyone's scheming like you, huh? Kei sneered silently to himself, conveniently ignoring the fact that he was exactly the type of person she was worried about. After all, he'd just manipulated Minato Namikaze, one of the key figures destined to become Hokage. Kei had planted the seed that the Uchiha clan played a role in Minato's rise to power. A dangerous illusion, one that might haunt the new Hokage for years to come. Kei had no intention of backing Ayaka's suggestion. And apparently, Amai Kenta wasn't fully on board with it either. So in the end, Kei simply used his authority as squad leader to order them to retrieve Kakashi and Nohara Rin. Facing off against an unknown number of Mist Nin was not something they were willing to risk without proper backup. Can you tell how many are down there? Kei asked, peering through the foliage again. He turned toward Hyuga Ayaka. And what about their chakra levels? 12 in total, Ayaka whispered. As for chakra strength, I'd say, quite impressive. Judging by that alone, they're likely all Jonin. Of course, rank didn't necessarily mean strength. Back when Kei, Kenta, and Ayaka were still officially listed as Chunin, they'd already taken down more than one so-called Jonin. Rank was merely a form of recognition. In the world of shinobi, real power wasn't determined by a title, nor by raw chakra alone. Before they had concrete intel, chakra signatures and shinobi ranks were at least useful for gauging potential danger. 12 of them, possibly Jonin level, Uchiha Kei muttered with a frown. Looks like this might be trouble. Summon Captain Minato. Even if he can't make it here in time, he needs to know we might be walking into something serious. Got it, Kakashi nodded, pulling out a kunai to send a message. But before he could act, damn it, they have a Byakugan. We've been spotted. Hyuga Ayaka suddenly shouted. Her face paled, and without hesitation, she leapt into the air. Uchiha Kei instantly followed. Kakashi and the others were briefly confused. Why would Mist Nin have a Byakugan? Still, as trained shinobi in wartime, they didn't hesitate for long. Seeing Kei move was all the signal they needed. In unison, they scattered. Just in time, a massive water dragon came crashing into their previous hiding spot, an explosive surge of water tearing through the terrain they'd just vacated. Kei wasn't shocked that a Mist Nin had the Byakugan. What surprised him was which Mist Nin it was. He recognized that man, a battle-hardened warrior, fiercely loyal to the traditions of the ancients. A man once hailed as the Byakugan of unwavering loyalty, the seer who saw through deception. That man was Ao, the future head of the Mist's Black Ops and the commander of the Sensory Division during the Fourth Great Ninja War. Why is he here? Kei narrowed his eyes. As he landed, a thick mist suddenly spread through the area. Hidden Mist Jutsu, a technique the Mist Village had long favored. Looking around, Kei frowned. Their team had scattered in different directions during the earlier evasion, and now with the fog obscuring everything, he had no visual on them. He sighed quietly. Another battle was inevitable. Kei wasn't particularly afraid of the hidden mist technique. In its most refined form, it could even block the vision of the Rinnegan. But these Mist Nin hadn't infused much chakra into the jutsu. The fog was thin, diluted. Kei could still perceive
faint outlines, chakra silhouettes moving through the mist. Not clearly, but enough to act. Still, a thought crept into his mind. Could Ao's presence here be linked to Madara Uchiha? Did he send this group of Mist Nin after Kei, including even someone like Ao? Quite the bold move, Uchiha Madara. Kei thought darkly. Maybe he's worried someone will discover the genjutsu on the Mizukage. So he sent someone with the Byakugan to keep it under wraps. If so, it made sense. The Mizukage, especially the fourth, might be the most unfortunate of all the Kage. First manipulated by Madara Uchiha. Later, the fourth Mizukage Yagura was placed under Obito's control. The Mist's leadership fell into chaos under Obito's ruthless agenda, stirring discontent among the upper ranks. Eventually, Ao, with his Byakugan, discovered that Yagura had been under genjutsu all along. After the illusion was lifted, Yagura didn't last long. Uchiha Itachi came and killed him soon after. With the Mizukage dead, the Mist Village entered a long period of political instability, governed not by a Kage, but by an elder advisor known only as Genji. This elder held power equal to the Kage, and Mist tradition required his approval on all important matters. Perhaps due to the lingering trauma of Yagura's rule, or the corrupting influence of power, Genji refused to select a new Mizukage for years. And so the Mist Village languished in a state of shadowless leadership. It wasn't until just before the Fourth Great Ninja War, when the Akatsuki's hunt for the tailed beasts escalated, that the Raikage convened a rare 5-Kage summit. With Genji aging and unable to travel, the Mizukage's hat was finally passed on to Meiturumi. As Kei recalled this history, so far removed from the land of fire, his muscles
tensed. His eyes turned scarlet. Sharingan awakened. He swept his gaze across the thick fog. Then he smiled. A glint of steel. A long blade suddenly pierced through Kei's back. Crack. In a flash, his body exploded into splinters, just a wooden log. A substitution jutsu. The real Uchiha Kei appeared behind the attacker in the same instant. His blade drawn, coated in electric blue chakra, Kei ignored the masked Mist Nin in front of him and stabbed straight into a shallow puddle at his feet. The water turned crimson in a heartbeat. The Mist Nin in front of him dissolved into a large splash, nothing more than a water clone. Chapter 125, Lava Release. Watch out, it's the Sharingan. As Uchiha Kei cut down a Mist Nin with a single strike, the ninja's comrades immediately noticed something unusual. One of them shouted a warning to the others in the fog-drenched battlefield. But Mist Nin were true to their name, cold and ruthless. None of them even flinched at the death of their comrade. The chilling indifference they displayed made Kei's skin crawl. The bloody mist policy had long since taken root. Just look at that no-eyebrow freak Zabuza. He was born the same year as Kakashi and Kei, and yet, he had killed every one of his classmates during graduation. Clearly, the Blood Mist era began under Madara's control of the Mizukage. And once Obito took Madara's place, he inherited that political legacy without hesitation. Under Obito's manipulation, Kurigakure became a village drowning in fear, violence, and silence. Uchiha Kei paid no mind to the Mist Nin who'd just died by his hand. To him, an enemy's life wasn't worth a second thought. His scarlet Sharingan spun rapidly, sweeping across the battlefield. In moments, he understood the enemy's tactics. There were 12 Mist Nin, split into 3 teams, trying to overwhelm Kei's squad of 5. Kakashi had stayed close to Rin in order to protect her, effectively making them their own team. But even so, did the Mist really think this strategy would work? The Byakugan could pierce through the Mist-style smokescreen effortlessly, and this particular Mist technique wasn't especially powerful. Even Kakashi could see through it using his Sharingan. As for Amai Kenta, the only one in Kei's squad without a dojutsu, he had refined sensory perception. In short, the Mist Jutsu was pointless here. If anything, it only worked against its users. Tell me, Kei said calmly, his voice cutting through the thick fog like a blade, why would Mist Nin trek all the way to the land of grass? His gaze locked onto 2 chakra signatures hiding within the mist. One was tall, clearly a grown man. The other was shorter, seemingly around Kei's own age. What intrigued Uchiha Kei the most was that the shorter Mist Nin appeared to be a woman. A woman joining the Anbu wasn't particularly rare. Female shinobi were often better suited for certain missions than their male counterparts. Likewise, a young shinobi entering the Anbu wasn't unusual either. After all, geniuses appeared in every generation. But a young woman in the Anbu? That was worth noting. It meant this girl wasn't just special, she was likely exceptional. Neither of the Mist Nin responded to Kei's earlier question. The tall and short duo stood side by side, eyes sharp with caution as they faced him. That lack of reaction made Kei lose a bit of interest, but he didn't dare let his guard down. Being a shinobi was a profession where even the strongest could fall in an instant. Countless renowned ninja had died to a simple kunai. Take Pakura, of Sunagakure, for instance, dead despite his infamy. Taking a deep breath, Kei made the first move. With a flicker of his body flicker technique, he instantly closed the gap between himself and the male Mist Nin, slashing down with his blue-tinged chakra blade. But the Mist Nin was alert and fast, he dodged the moment Kei moved. Meanwhile, the female Mist Nin wasn't idle either. Her hands blurred through hand seals, and in an instant, she launched a water-style, water dragon bullet from her mouth. A massive, spiraling water dragon roared toward Kei. He didn't flinch. After missing his first strike, he calmly turned to face the oncoming jutsu. His crimson eyes quickly analyzed its structure and pinpointed its weakness. With a swift thrust of his blade, he pierced through the water dragon, splitting it clean in 2. But just as the dragon dissipated, the male Mist Nin tapped his toe lightly on the ground and glided forward with a strange grace. Midair, he unsheathed his katana in one fluid motion. With a soft push, he let the empty scabbard fall, its tip embedding into the muddy earth below. His movement was elegant, almost poetic. The blade danced in the air, forming a flawless arc, and with a silent, lethal precision, it aimed straight for Kei's throat. Despite the beauty of the motion, even Kei, no sword master himself, could tell the form was unorthodox. There were subtle extra movements, ones even beginners might avoid. And yet, Kei couldn't deny its pressure. In this man's hands, the flawed form became an elegant and deadly rhythm. A samurai, Kei raised his blade defensively. Or, one of the 7 ninja swordsmen. Regardless of who he was, the man was an enemy. And enemies must die. Kei's Sharingan locked onto his opponent. The 3 tomo spun, capturing every detail. With a crisp clang, the 2 blades collided midair. Kei's sword held steady, blocking the enemy's just 20 centimeters from his neck. Such speed, such finesse. Kei's thoughts churned. He hadn't expected swordsmanship this refined. The Sharingan's tomo came to a halt, focusing sharply on the Mist Nin's eyes. But the Mist Nin, clearly experienced in fighting Uchihas, immediately shut his eyes and shifted tactics. His attack thwarted, he pivoted and launched a powerful kick toward Kei's side. Kei easily evaded with a slight twist of his torso, and at that moment, his left hand lit up with crackling Chidori lightning. But just then, the female Mist Nin's voice rang out. Now, dodge. The male Mist Nin planted his foot into the ground and sprang away in an instant. Kei suddenly sensed a shift in the surrounding chakra. Lava release. dissolving monster jutsu. A torrent of molten orange sludge, half magma, half corrosive acid, erupted and surged toward Kei. The searing heat and caustic mist shocked even him. But Kei wasn't unprepared. In the split second before the lava touched him, he activated body flicker once more and vanished. Landing safely atop a nearby tree, he stared down at the scorched and sunken earth left behind. Then his eyes shifted to the masked woman responsible. Just his luck. This woman hadn't shown up in the original story. In the canon timeline, every mist nin who tried to intercept Kakashi and Rin had been slaughtered by Obito. Not a single one survived, hence Kei's earlier shock at encountering Ao. But timeline or not, an enemy was still an enemy. Kei never let the original plot cloud his judgment, especially when his life was on the line. Then, without warning, a breeze stirred. And riding that wind, came the telltale whoosh of a blade slicing through air. Chapter 126, Identical Techniques. As the long blade sliced through the air with a faint, distorted hum, a strange phenomenon unfolded around Uchiha Kei. He was suddenly surrounded by the sounds of all kinds of wind. There was the gentle breeze of spring, the cool gusts of summer nights, the crisp winds of autumn mornings, the biting chill of winter air, the roaring gale, the spiraling twister. It felt as though every kind of wind in the world had gathered in this one moment. Yet oddly enough, there was no physical sensation of wind at all. This bizarre dissonance was so unnatural it nearly made Kei want to cough up blood. At this point, Kei was certain, this male mist nin was far from ordinary. His swordsmanship, Kei had no choice but to admire it. And he was equally certain that this wasn't genjutsu. With his Sharingan active, Kei would never fall for an illusion so easily. That left only one plausible explanation. This man had fused his chakra into his blade technique at such a refined level that it produced a unique rhythm, a style so advanced it created illusion-like effects through sheer skill alone. Kei tilted his head slightly in contemplation. Samurai did exist in the shinobi world, after all. And when someone managed to merge the discipline of a swordsman with the versatility of a shinobi, the result was a force to be reckoned with. Take Mifune of the Land of Iron, for example. Or Hanzo of the Salamander, the so-called demigod who once earned Jiraiya, Tsunade, and Orochimaru the title of legendary Sannin. Both were swordmasters whose blade skills bordered on the supernatural. Though Kei found the demigod Hanzo title mildly amusing, he wasn't arrogant enough to underestimate him. He knew what the gods of the shinobi world looked like. He had Madara Uchiha and Hashirama Senju as reference. Compared to them, Kei was still far from that tier. Shaking the thought from his mind, Kei returned his focus to the immediate threat. This mist nin had to be dealt with first. As the enemy's sword came slashing toward him with increasing ferocity, Kei made no move to evade. Instead, brilliant chakra surged across his blade, and with a swift strike, he intercepted the attack, his sword clashing directly against the mist nins. His Sharingan continued spinning, tirelessly recording and analyzing every movement. Though he couldn't find a window for genjutsu, there was still much he could learn. This mist nin's sword was infused with wind and water chakra. It wasn't a Kekkei Genkei, but rather an advanced elemental fusion technique, a sophisticated synergy that fascinated Kei. He studied it intently. If this man survived the fight, Kei might just have to interrogate him thoroughly. But he wasn't about to be outdone. As the mist nin's chakra-infused blade bore down, Kei responded in kind, his own blade bursting to life with crackling lightning chakra. At the same time, with a flick of his wrist, Kei hurled a kunai toward the masked mist nin woman, who might very well be Terumi Mei. You're getting distracted. The male mist nin growled, catching Kei's movement. In the blink of an eye, his attacks intensified. Each swing of his blade, charged with wind and water chakra, now aimed directly for Kei's vital points. Despite how dangerous each clash appeared, Uchiha Kei remained entirely in control. It may have looked perilous, but in truth, he was never truly in danger. His swordsmanship was still average at best. Even after copying the techniques of Kakashi and Kentaro Amai, the process of integrating their styles hadn't been easy. Yet even so, Uchiha Kei, with his Sharingan, couldn't be judged by ordinary standards. While engaging the male mist nin in battle and analyzing his sword style, Kei remained fully alert, constantly watching for a sneak attack from the woman who resembled Terumi Mei. And he did all this with a calm ease, weaving through danger like a butterfly dancing on the edge of blades, elegant in form, but deadly in execution. The two mist nin, both the man and the woman, had clearly caught on. What made it worse for them was the creeping realization that Kei might be copying the man's sword style on the spot. But there was nothing they could do about it. This Uchiha was dangerously skilled. In the past, they could rely on speed to overwhelm the Uchiha clan's visual prowess. But this boy in front of them was both fast and seasoned in actual combat. He reminded them of one infamous figure, Uchiha Shu. Shu's reputation was no less fearsome than Uchiha Yu's. He had even clashed with members of the 7 ninja swordsmen of the mist, and walked away unscathed. To think that this kid might be just as troublesome, if not worse. After all, Kei was the one who intended to kill Uchiha Shu. The elegant dance soon came to an end. Kei had seen enough. He had essentially figured out the core of the Mist Nin's technique. Though he couldn't yet merge wind and water chakra into his blade, Rankiri was already more than enough for now. Dodging a vicious swing from the male Mist Nin and flipping away to avoid a sneak attack from the woman, Kei's left hand tightened. Chidori formed with a shriek. The piercing cry of 1,000 birds echoed through the mist, an ominous sound made all the more terrifying by the blinding fog. It radiated pressure and dread. Thanks for the warm-up. I'm done playing. With a flicker of movement, Kei used a body flicker technique to appear directly behind the woman resembling Terumi Mei. In a flash, his left hand drove forward, Chidori aimed straight for her heart. Though Kei hadn't yet mastered Chidori to the level where it didn't require a running start, at this close range, simply piercing the chest and releasing the lightning chakra would still cause devastating damage. But the woman's reaction was incredibly fast. In Kei's eyes, her body dissolved into water, a water clone. Still, Kei didn't stop. His Sharingan had already locked onto her real location. Lightning surged brighter in his left hand, and with a calm breath, he drove the Chidori clean through the dissolving clone, then continued the thrust toward her actual position. But just then, Kei's expression shifted subtly. Something felt wrong. The water from the clone was changing, unnaturally. Water style. Water prison jutsu. As expected, just before his Chidori could reach her, the burst clone suddenly expanded, forming a sphere of water around him at incredible speed. This woman knew her tricks well. This move was almost identical to how Zabuza would one day use it against Kakashi. And just like that, Uchiha Kei was completely enveloped by the water prison. His Chidori flickered and fizzled out. His body, suspended in the watery sphere, was trapped. It's over. The female Mist Nin, likely Terumi Mei, stepped into view, her hands still sealed in a jutsu formation. The male Mist Nin landed beside her, sword in hand, slowly advancing toward the helpless Uchiha Kei. But just then, a strange smile curled across Kei's lips. Chapter 127, A Sinister Man. Looks like things are getting messy. Again. Amai Kenta sighed helplessly as the surrounding mist grew denser and more suffocating. He was starting to notice a pattern. Whenever he found himself with Uchiha Kei and that Hyuga woman, Ayaka, disaster seemed to follow without fail. Last time, it was a near-death suicide mission followed by a bridge explosion. And now, they were surrounded by a squad of mist Anbu in the middle of nowhere. Kenta didn't bother trying to make sense of it anymore, he couldn't even if he tried. All he hoped for now was that Kei would stick to his future job as vice captain of the Konoha military police, and stop dragging his teammates out on these top-secret, totally not legal missions under mysterious pretenses. With a resigned breath, Kenta silently drew his ninja blade. His hands were clammy, his posture stiff with tension. Suddenly, the sound of wind slicing through the mist jolted him. He spun around instantly and swung his blade toward the sound. But his sword met only air. There was no enemy, only the thick fog swirling in silence. Instead of calming him, the lack of contact made Kenta even more jittery. His nerves were stretched tight, like a bowstring about to snap. Whiz, whiz, whiz. At that moment, a barrage of kunai whistled through the fog from all directions. Kenta had no idea where they were coming from. Desperate, he thrashed wildly with his sword, slashing and spinning in blind panic. The sound of steel clashing with steel rang out in chaotic echoes. To his credit, Kenta's luck held, he managed to deflect most of the incoming kunai. But his misfortune followed close behind. He couldn't see the exact trajectories, and a few blades still grazed his arms and legs, drawing shallow cuts. His breathing grew heavier, loud and ragged. He looked like someone who had just crawled out of death's grasp. Yet the fear in his eyes was undeniable. It was growing, uncontrolled and raw. Kenta swallowed hard, eyes darting left and right in paranoid alertness. Every rustle, Every faint breeze sent his body jerking around, trying to locate threats that might not even exist. Sweat streamed down his forehead. He was nearing his limit, physically and mentally. The enemies were invisible, the fog was thick, and the entire atmosphere was twisted, like a nightmare closing in. How pitiful. A voice whispered right in Kenta's ear. Allow me to put you out of your misery. Who's there? Amai Kenta screamed hysterically, swinging his ninja blade violently behind him. And once again, he struck nothing but empty air. Is this the level of Konoha's shinobi? Pathetic. Honestly, it's laughable. The mocking voice rang out again from behind him, laced with scorn and amusement. Don't worry. Your suffering will be brief, it'll all be over in a moment. Whoosh. A terrifying blade cleaved through the fog with a piercing whistle. And in the blink of an eye, Amai Kenta was split clean in two. What a pitiful brat. A mist shinobi slowly emerged from behind the corpse, sneering. Seems like Konoha's running out of decent shinobi, sending out trash like this. What's even funnier is, they managed to find us. But we're not even here for them. Stop wasting time, Fuji, another voice called out from the mist. We have more important things to do. Cut off his head and bring it back. We need to figure out what they know. We can't afford to expose ourselves. Yeah, I got it. Fuji chuckled and crouched beside Kenta's body. But the moment his eyes landed on the corpse, his entire body stiffened in alarm. It looked disturbingly real. A clean, fatal wound. A look of unwillingness frozen in the eyes. Blood and viscera scattered everywhere. But it was all saturated with chakra. A clone, a transformation, a trap. Fuji's instincts screamed danger, but before he could even warn his comrade, a blade silently sliced through the fog toward his throat. He reflexively clutched his neck, blood spilling between his fingers. A figure caught his collapsing body before it could hit the ground. What's wrong, Fuji? The other mist shinobi asked casually. Hurry it up. We need to assist the others. No problem, came the reply. I just wanted to take a closer look at him before he died. Fuji, his consciousness fading, looked up in horror. The figure beneath him, the one mimicking his voice, tone, and cadence perfectly, was none other than Amai Kenta. Huh. The second mist shinobi froze. His expression shifted instantly as realization hit. Careful. This guy's not normal. But his warning came a second too late. In a flash, Amai Kenta appeared before him, closing the distance with unbelievable speed. The blade in Kenta's hand arced in a strange, deadly curve. The mist shinobi tried to react, but his instincts failed him. He had let down his guard, assuming Kenta was just a coward. That fatal assumption cost him his life. Kenta was anything but timid. He was cunning, a master at exploiting weaknesses in his enemies. And his speed was so sharp that even Uchiha Kei had once praised it. Goo. No scream. No bloodbath. Just a soft, strangled gurgle as the blade ended the mist shinobi's life in one clean stroke. All he saw before darkness claimed him was a flash of cold steel. Beautiful and deadly. Amai Kenta didn't spare the corpse a second glance. Instead, he smiled, a sincere, gentle smile. Gone was the panicked, trembling figure from before. His ambush had been flawlessly executed, swift, efficient, and devastatingly lethal. Looks like you guys really were on a mission. And not targeting Konoha, either. Kenta looked up at the final mist shinobi, still smiling softly. It's clearly a highly confidential operation, even you people seem reluctant to talk about it. TCH. The last mist shinobi stood on high alert, staring at the smiling boy like he was facing a ghost. Let me guess, Kenta continued thoughtfully, as if talking to himself. Maybe you're working with Iwa. After all, Iwa and Konoha are negotiating peace right now, and if someone wanted to sabotage that, it'd definitely benefit Kurigakure. Or maybe, he mused, eyes narrowing. You're here to investigate something. Something top secret. Just a guess, of course. But you could save us both the trouble and just tell me the truth. That depends on whether you can make me talk. The last mist shinobi gripped his blade tightly, gaze wary and unblinking. Then suddenly, without warning, he turned and fled into the mist. Kenta blinked, then chuckled. Looks like I scared him. He glanced down at the two corpses at his feet, then began to move. Dealing with one enemy was way easier than going to help the others. He figured. Besides, no one said he had to kill the last one, right? Chapter 128, Perfect Swordsmanship. // Rin, stay close. Kakashi pulled down the mask over his face, revealing a crimson Sharingan with two tomo spinning slowly in his eye. I'll protect you. Quote. Kakashi. Rin whispered softly, her heart clearly moved. Then she nodded firmly and drew a kunai, her eyes warily scanning the fog-shrouded surroundings. The hidden mist jutsu had drastically limited their
visibility. Rin knew full well she wouldn't be of much help in this situation. The best she could do was not become a burden. Kakashi, meanwhile, felt a rising urgency in his chest. He wasn't afraid of these mist shinobi, far from it. With Obito's Sharingan, he could partially pierce through the dense fog and discern the silhouettes moving within. And because of that vision, he clearly saw the mist shinobi's tactics. They intended to divide and conquer, and worse, they were targeting Rin more than him. No, I need to shift their focus onto me. He gritted his teeth. I have to take one of them out fast. Make it clear they won't reach Rin as long as I'm standing. Only then will they concentrate their firepower on me. He glanced at Rin again. She wasn't particularly skilled in combat, but she could hold off a little. The problem was, these weren't ordinary enemy ninja. These were Mist Anbu, assassins who specialized in ambush and brutality. Kakashi didn't believe Rin could withstand even a moment if they reached her. He couldn't afford to play defensively. If he allowed two mist shinobi to tie him up, the third would slip past and eliminate Rin in an instant. His stance shifted, shoulders tensing, knees bending. His right hand settled gently on the hilt of his blade. The swordsmanship he'd learned from his father, though Tsukumo Hatake had died early, was burned into him with muscle memory and instinct. Slowly, Kakashi controlled his breathing, letting it grow steadier. Then, he closed one eye. Only the Sharingan remained open, scanning the fog like a lighthouse in a storm. Suddenly, the mist shinobi moved. They split into two groups. Two lunged at Kakashi. One went straight for Rin. Kakashi didn't budge. He remained motionless, still as stone. Closer. Closer.
And then, he exhaled. In that instant, the Sharingan in his eye seemed to blaze, casting a light more brilliant than moonlight and more piercing than a sky full of stars. In Kakashi's vision, color drained from the world, and everything dissolved into stark black and white, as if reality itself was being judged. Then, a slash of silver light shot into the sky. Colorless, and yet it felt like it encompassed every possible hue. That sword slash split the black and white world apart, cleaving reality with a brilliance that could not be matched. By the time his exhaled breath had completely left his lungs, one of the mist shinobi had already been cut down. Kakashi didn't spare the fallen enemy a glance, nor the second who was swinging a blade down at him from the side. Instead, with a forceful stomp, Kakashi launched himself backward, his body gliding through the mist. As he moved, he flung a kunai toward the mist shinobi on his flank. And without pause, swung his sword at the one charging toward Rin. Every motion was as fluid as running water. Every action was sharp, clean, and impossibly fast. The mist shinobi charging at Rin reacted swiftly. He raised his blade in time to block Kakashi's strike, but not without cost. Though he caught the blow, Kakashi's razor-sharp edge still sliced through, leaving a gash across the mist ninja's chest. Without hesitation, Kakashi followed up with a powerful kick that sent the enemy tumbling backwards in a disheveled heap. Landing with practiced ease, Kakashi didn't look back at Rin. He was still caught in the afterglow of that one, perfect strike. It had been the cleanest cut he'd ever executed. No wasted motion, perfect timing, perfect angle, perfect strength, perfect speed. Every element had come together without the slightest flaw. As that blade had cleaved the world, the fog of battle had faded, and color had returned to the world. In this renewed vision of color, Kakashi stared at the remaining mist shinobi, and quietly reflected. Uchiha Kei was right. His advice, his vision, it was the correct path all along. Merging his father's swordsmanship with Obito's Sharingan, blending taijutsu and ninjutsu into one seamless style, this was Kakashi's true road forward. He glanced down at the sword in his hand, the blade glowing with brilliant blue chakra, just like Kei's. Pristine. Untainted. Not a drop of blood upon it. Behind him, the mist shinobi he had cut suddenly collapsed to the ground. A burst of blood erupted from his chest before he went limp, silent, unmoving. Obito, thank you for your eye. It let me see everything clearly. Kei, thank you for your guidance. You helped me find a new path. With that, Kakashi's resolve only deepened. He knew it wouldn't be easy to re-enter that flawless state again. But now that he had experienced it once, he believed he could refine it further, again and again. But that was for later. For now, he had to kill the 2 remaining mist shinobi. Taking a deep breath, Kakashi locked his Sharingan onto them. His killing intent radiated so intensely, it felt as though it could tear through the fog itself. Rin, he said calmly, never looking back, step back. I'll handle this. Find a place to hide, it won't take long. Kakashi. Rin gripped her kunai tighter, but then nodded solemnly. I understand. I'll wait for you. Without hesitation, she turned and dashed into the nearby forest. The 2 mist shinobi watched her go, but neither dared to make a move. They knew, if they made one wrong step, this silver-haired shinobi in front of them would strike them down without mercy. They exchanged a glance, silently understanding each other. In unison, they nodded, and then, as one, they charged straight at Kakashi. But Kakashi's expression remained calm. The chakra surging along his blade flared even brighter. As the 2 mist shinobi attacked from left and right, Kakashi moved. Meanwhile, Rin ran quietly into the forest, her thoughts heavy with frustration. She realized that from beginning to end, she had always been the one being protected. Obito had protected her. Their sensei, Minato sensei, had protected her. Even their classmate Amai Kenta had stood up for her. And now Kakashi was doing the same. I'm so useless, Rin thought bitterly. But that frustration lit a fire inside her. She clenched her fists as she ran. No more. She would catch up to them. She would no longer be the burden that held the team back. She would stand alongside Kakashi and Kei, not behind them. With that resolve burning in her heart, Rin slowed her pace. She had reached what seemed to be a safe distance. She exhaled in relief. But then, a sharp whistle cut through the air. The sound of a kunai. Rin's instincts kicked in. She jumped, narrowly dodging the blade. But she wasn't fast enough. The kunai grazed her hair, slicing off a few strands as it passed. She landed in a crouch, unsteady and flustered. Before she could react again, a sharp pain pierced her neck. A burning sting, followed by an instant wave of numbness and dizziness. Her vision swam. Kakashi, I'm sorry, was her last thought before the world went dark. Chapter 129, A Sudden Variable. Not bad, that Hyuga brat is more capable than I expected. Ao stared calmly at the girl before him, the corners of his mouth curling into a mocking smirk. Yes, she was quite capable. Despite the overwhelming pressure he had unleashed, Hyuga Ayaka had managed to hold her ground, and right in front of him, she had taken down 2 of his subordinates without hesitation. This woman's skills were indeed impressive. Her gentle fist techniques were refined, and more importantly, she was decisive. In a battle of equals, she had been willing to take minor wounds in exchange for maximum advantage. Even now, with blood trickling from a fresh blade wound and her breathing ragged, she still stood firm. Ao's eyes showed appreciation, but there wasn't even a flicker of desire to recruit her. After all, ever since he killed a main branch member of the Hyuga clan years ago and took one of their Byakugan for himself, the main family had rarely stepped onto the battlefield. These days, the Hyuga who were sent to the front lines were almost all from the branch family, each cursed with the clan's terrifying seal to prevent the leakage of bloodline secrets. In other words, no value in turning them. To Ao, she was nothing more than a bird in a cage, pretty, but shackled, and destined to never soar free. She was worthless to him. The only respect he could show her was to go all out and kill her. With that thought, Ao gave a slight smile. In a flash, he used body flicker technique to close the distance between them. Raising a single finger, he lunged straight for Hyuga Ayaka's chest. Water style. Azure Dragon striking hand. A strange chakra gathered at the tip of Ao's finger. This was a technique of his own creation, developed by combining the water nature with the pinpoint precision of the Byakugan. He would identify the enemy's chakra points using his Byakugan and then channel water chakra through his finger, striking with deadly, penetrating force. It resembled the gentle fist, but it was far more dangerous, tailored to Ao's own unique talents. Hyuga Ayaka, exhausted and bleeding, clenched her teeth as she faced him head-on. Rotation. She raised one hand gently as her feet spun into a perfect circular motion. In the blink of an eye, her entire body whirled with tremendous force, releasing chakra in a full 360-degree shield. Ao's sharp jab struck the rotating dome. But it couldn't pierce through. His chakra-imbued finger failed to lock onto any Tenketsu chakra point, and his strike couldn't breach her defense. Ao, however, showed no frustration. He simply smiled and leapt back, hands weaving through a series of rapid seals. Water style. Surging water wave. A powerful blast of water erupted from Ao's mouth, flooding forward like a tide. You like to stand there and block. Let's see how long you can hold out. The sudden flood hit Ayaka like a tidal wave. Though she tried to maintain her rotation technique, the sheer volume and force of water overwhelmed her defenses. Ao didn't waste the opportunity. The moment he landed and steadied himself, he was already forming the next set of hand seals. Water style. Water dragon bullet technique. A massive dragon made of water surged forward with a deafening roar, crashing toward Ayaka like an unstoppable force of nature. But Hyuga Ayaka was no pushover. Even with her defense broken, she refused to fall. 8 trigrams. Gentle step twin lion fists. Blue lion-shaped chakra surged to life around her fists as she charged to meet the dragon head-on. The 8 trigrams gentle fist was the core of the Hyuga clan's style. And as a branch family member, Ayaka should never have had access to such an advanced technique. But her talent and memory were exceptional. Using her Byakugan, she had silently observed and memorized the techniques over time, and then trained in secret, eventually recreating them on her own. Even so, the gentle fist techniques used by branch family members were never quite as complete or powerful as those of the main family. There was always a flaw, a gap. But Ayaka believed, if she trained hard enough, refined it deeply enough, she could reach their level. Or even surpass it. That belief was her greatest secret within the Hyuga clan. She had already secretly learned every 8 trigrams technique she could possibly observe. The twin chakra lions roaring from Hyuga Ayaka's fists let out a fierce bellow as she stepped forward and struck with a powerful palm. In an instant, the head of the water dragon bullet was shattered into mist. She followed with another step, twisting her body mid-motion and delivering a backhand strike. The rest of the dragon crumbled, collapsing into a splash of blue water at her feet. But Ayaka had no time to feel proud. Ao had already closed the distance, not giving her even a second to catch her breath. Water style. Azure Dragon Striking Hand. Another lightning-fast thrust, the same technique as before, but this time, Ayaka had no time to react. Ao's speed was overwhelming. He was a top-tier member of the Hidden Mists Anbu, an elite from one of the bloodiest divisions. His finger, infused with deadly chakra, drove straight for the chakra point on Ayaka's back. But Ayaka's instincts didn't fail her. She spun on her heel just in time, her lion-cloaked fist lashing out with another fierce roar, directly toward Ao's outstretched finger. However, the moment her strike landed, Ayaka's expression changed. There was no impact. Ao had vanished. Water Clone. A classic mist-style substitution jutsu, simple, deadly, and perfect for sneak attacks. Ayaka realized it instantly and began redirecting her chakra flow, her body spinning into a defensive countermeasure. But Ao was too fast. The moment she shifted her chakra, he was already behind her. His palm slammed squarely into her back. Crack. Ayaka coughed up a mouthful of blood. Even so, she didn't collapse. As her body staggered backward, she channeled the remaining momentum into a final desperate counterattack. 8 trigrams. Vacuum palm. A burst of compressed chakra exploded outward toward Ao. Impressive. You're tougher than I expected. Ao twisted smoothly out of the attack's path, narrowly dodging the invisible blast. He looked at Ayaka, admiration flickering in his eyes. She still stood, injured, swaying, but her eyes burned with defiance. I like that look in your eyes. Ao chuckled. Shame you're from the branch family. Oh well, time to put you down. His voice was calm, almost gentle. Deadly chakra began forming once again on the tip of his finger. But just as he was about to strike, his expression suddenly shifted. The chakra at his fingertip flickered, then faded. Without a word, he turned and dashed off in another direction. Rin, where are you? Meanwhile, in another part of the battlefield, Kakashi moved carefully through the forest, calling out as he advanced. Rin. Not long ago, he had taken down 2 of the Hidden Mist Anbu. They had fought as a perfectly coordinated pair and given Kakashi a run for his money. If it weren't for his recent growth in strength, and a sudden breakthrough in his swordsmanship during the heat of battle, he might not have defeated them so quickly. After dealing with the Mist Ninja, Kakashi didn't return to regroup with Uchiha Kei and the others. There was something more important. He had to find Rin. But after searching for some time, Kakashi still hadn't found any sign of her. His brow furrowed. It shouldn't take this long. Rin wouldn't have wandered far just to avoid getting caught in the crossfire. The longer he searched, the more uneasy he became. Was there someone else out there besides the 12 mist nin? Iwa nin? Or more hidden mist operatives? His instincts screamed that something was wrong. Then, he saw it. A kunai, lying in the underbrush. And along the path it had flown. A few strands of brown hair. Chapter 130. The Power of the Uchiha. Watch out. The woman, likely Terumi Mei, sensed something was wrong the moment she saw Uchiha Kei smile inside the water prison jutsu. A cold chill ran down her spine. That smile was too calm, too confident, too dangerous. Her instincts screamed at her, and she shouted a warning. The Uchiha clan was always troublesome to deal with. Proud, arrogant, even reckless, but undeniably powerful. And when it came to the Sharingan, that power only grew more terrifying. If you weren't careful, you might die without even knowing how you died. The male mist ninja was momentarily stunned. Then his face drained of color. Inside the water prison, Uchiha Kei vanished in a puff of smoke. A clone. A fake. The same realization struck both mist ninja at the same time. We've been tricked. They immediately drew their weapons, shifting into full alert. Now, surrounded by thick mist, they felt something chilling. This fog, meant to trap the enemy, had become a hunting ground. They were the ones exposed. And Kei, with those crimson eyes, was the predator in hiding. A light breeze drifted through. Cold sweat slid down their faces. They were no strangers to tension, but facing an unknown, elite Uchiha, even hardened mist assassins could only grit their teeth and stay calm. Then the wind picked up. A kunai came whistling through the fog, silent and sudden. The male mist ninja reacted instantly, parrying it with a swift backward slash. But before he could breathe, a shadow dropped from above. A sword hummed through the air, emitting a high-pitched, distorted screech. The blade shimmered with chakra, and in an instant, the air was filled with thunder. Spring's rumble, summer's crack, autumn's growl, winter's dry boom. Sharp bolts, wild bursts, sky-splitting roars. It felt as if every kind of thunderstorm the world had ever known had come crashing down around him. And yet, there was no real lightning. Nothing touched him. No heat. No flash. Only sound. Only pressure. It was unreal, unsettling, terrifying. He felt like he was staring at a version of himself, warped, incomplete, foreign. Is this the power of the Uchiha? Is this their true power? No time to think. Even if Kei's sword didn't carry the same polished rhythm as a master's, the form was almost identical. How much of his sword style had this Uchiha copied? How much had he already learned? One thing was certain, if he didn't defend now, he'd be dead. The mist ninja raised his blade high. Twin chakras, wind and water, flared to life on his sword as he brought it down hard to meet Kei's strike. Kei's blade fell like lightning, impossibly fast. At the moment their swords clashed, Kei's body twisted. Just slightly. Just enough. His blade arced in a strange, unexpected curve. Reikiri. Like a lightning serpent, Kei's sword slipped past the mist ninja's guard. It slammed into the man's waist with a vicious crack, chakra exploding on contact. Paralysis struck him immediately. The wound split wide, lightning chakra numbing his entire body. Blood gushed freely, but the mist ninja could do nothing. He stared at Kei in disbelief. He'd been defeated by his own sword style. Copied, altered, and used against him. The feeling of utter defeat twisted in his chest. This couldn't be real. And yet, Kei's modified sword art was so vicious, so unpredictable, and with that paralyzing lightning chakra. He had no chance. Uchiha Kei looked down at the motionless mist ninja and nodded in satisfaction. He hadn't killed him, not yet. There were still things he wanted to take. Of course, any benefits Uchiha Kei planned to extract from the captured mist ninja would have to wait. First, he needed to deal with the woman who looked suspiciously like Terumi Mei. That is, if the other guy didn't bleed out before then. // You used the water from your clone to trap me in a water prison. Clever move. Kei casually flicked the blood from his blade. But you really underestimated me, and my eyes. So, got anything else up your sleeve? The woman said nothing, but she raised a kunai defensively in front of her. That was all the answer he needed. Kei nodded. The next moment, he vanished, his body flicker technique exploding into action. In a blur, he reappeared behind her, chakra-charged sword already descending. There was no hesitation, No mercy, he wasn't about to go easy just because she was a woman. But the mist kunoichi was fast. In one smooth motion, she twisted her body and raised her kunai, blocking his blade in the nick of time. Then, the two engaged in fierce close combat. She was nimble, sharp, and impressively quick. But against Kei, who had both speed and Sharingan, she was still at a disadvantage. Within seconds, several cuts had already appeared on her body. If she hadn't escaped the moment Kei started to unleash Rankiri, his signature lightning slash, she would have already been captured, or dead. But this woman wasn't a fool. She could see just how deceptive Kei's blade techniques were. And there was no way she'd let herself get taken down by that sinister Rankiri strike. Still, dodging it came at a cost. The moment she revealed an opening, Kei slammed a powerful kick into her torso and sent her flying. Fire style. Great dragon fire technique. Kei wasn't about to waste the opportunity. He didn't expect the fire jutsu to kill her, but it would definitely disrupt her rhythm, and that was more than enough. As expected, the moment she hit the ground, she began forming hand seals. Water style. Water formation pillar. Still under heavy pressure from Kei, and now forced to channel chakra into defense. Her rhythm was shattered. That was always dangerous for a shinobi. A ball of water, like a falling meteor, spewed from her mouth and exploded outward on impact, rising into a towering wall of water. It met Kei's fire head on. A massive burst of steam erupted, completely clouding her vision. But she didn't stop. Her pace had been thrown off, yes, but that didn't mean she'd lost. Her hands blurred again in a rapid seal sequence. Chakra surged inside her. She was waiting, watching, for the perfect chance. Then, a shadowy figure emerged through the mist. She didn't hesitate. She didn't care if it was a trick or not. This was her only shot. Boil release. Skilled mist technique. A deadly blend of water and fire chakra, the acidic mist exploded forth. The temperature rose instantly, hot enough to melt flesh and metal alike. But just then, a blade silently pierced her shoulder from behind. Before she could even scream, a surge of lightning chakra flooded her body, paralyzing her instantly. Chapter 131, Captured. Captain, is this the one we're after? Not far from the fierce battle between Uchiha Kei and the Mist Nin, deep within the forest, a group of masked Mist Anbu were swiftly retreating. One of them had a girl slung over his shoulder, Nohara Rin. They were the ones responsible for Rin's abduction. In truth, they had noticed Kei's battle quite early on, and had used it as the perfect distraction to sneak closer and execute their mission undetected. There were more than a dozen of them, and their objective was highly classified. Capture this Konoha Kunoichi, seal something interesting inside her, and send her back to Konoha, where chaos would erupt. They didn't fully understand why she had been singled out, but that wasn't their concern. They were Anbu, especially Mist Anbu, and they knew better than to question orders. Their duty was to carry them out. Yes, the Mist captain nodded. She's the target. I don't know exactly why the Mizukage gave this order, but our grudge with Konoha justifies the risk. True, another Anbu chimed in. There's no way we can let Konoha keep winning without any setbacks. Some murmurs of agreement followed. But, the elders don't seem to fully trust us, one of them added, then hesitated. Otherwise, enough, the captain cut in coldly. Focus on your mission. And don't forget the genjutsu. We can't let her commit suicide. Poor girl, one Anbu muttered under his breath. No idea how long she can keep it together. But the moment the squad captain shot him a glare, he quickly shut up. Understood. We'll handle it properly. Meanwhile, not bad. 2 Kekkei Genkei, huh? Uchiha Kei slowly drew his blade from the woman's shoulder. The woman, who did indeed appear to be Terumi Mei, was completely paralyzed by his Reikiri technique. Her entire body was overwhelmed by lightning chakra. She couldn't move, couldn't speak. She was finished. Uchiha Kei was now certain. The woman before him was indeed Terumi Mei, the future Mizukage who would one day end the nearly decade-long period of leadership vacuum in the hidden mist. But one thing puzzled him. Why was she here? It didn't make sense. Could his own appearance in this world have inadvertently become the flap of a butterfly's wing, altering history in unforeseen ways? Still, Kei didn't dwell on it. Whether she lived or died didn't concern him. Mizukage or not, it made no difference. If Terumi Mei died, someone else would simply rise to take her place. Just like how Obito had been chosen by Madara Uchiha, partly by chance, partly by necessity. It wasn't fate. Just contingency. After all, the fourth Raikage was preparing to convene the 5-Cage summit, and the former Mist Elder was no longer fit to rule. Kei stared coldly at the woman before him. Although her back was still to him and her face was obscured by a mask, he could easily imagine her current expression, pale, grim, and likely filled with dread. Once Kei fully withdrew his blade from her back, he casually twirled it before resting the edge against her neck. By now, the thick mist had begun to dissipate, likely because the mist nin responsible for maintaining it had all been killed. With no one left to sustain the jutsu, the fog was naturally vanishing. Speak. Why are you here? Kei asked calmly. Still, his senses remained on high alert. After all, Obito could show up at any moment. Humph. Terumi Mei snorted coldly. She was clearly despairing, but she had no intention of answering him. Stubborn, are we? Kei gave a faint, amused smile. That's fine. I've got a bit of patience left, especially for someone with 2 Kekkei Genkei. I'm very patient when it comes to rare bloodlines. Kill me. I won't say a word, she replied, her voice weak from paralysis, but still firm and resolute. Kei's smile deepened. Did this woman really think he wouldn't kill her? He already had a clear idea of their purpose here, it was all for Obito's Mangekyo awakening. Whether Terumi Mei spoke or not didn't really matter. Looking at the kneeling woman, Kei felt no pity. Sure, it was a shame she'd taken this mission, but her fate was already sealed. Dead is dead. Whether by his hand or Obito's, what difference did it make? In fact, Kei preferred clean solutions. And when it came to problems, his approach was simple. Eliminate them completely. People like Kitsuchi had simply been lucky to survive multiple encounters with him. Just as Kei was about to end it painlessly, a sudden shout rang out. Stop. Kei frowned slightly. Though his blade remained pressed against Terumi Mei's neck, he did pause. Looking up, he couldn't help but chuckle at the sight. Ao, of all people, was approaching with Hyuga Ayaka at kunai point, using her as leverage. But Ao knew better than to get too close. He stopped about 20 meters away, maintaining a safe distance to avoid any unexpected retaliation. Let her go, Ao said coldly. Or I'll kill your comrade. Kei raised an eyebrow in amusement. What's wrong with you? Do you really think I'm that easy to fool? His voice was mocking as he smirked. You want to trade a Hyuga branch family girl for a mist ninja with 2 bloodline limits. Did you hit your head this morning? Ao's face darkened. He couldn't deny it. No one with half a brain would agree to such a trade. Internally, he cursed Terumi Mei for revealing her Kekkei Genkei in the first place. But truth be told, if she hadn't, she would have been dead by now. Ao had been using his Byakugan the entire battle. He knew just how dangerous these teenage brats from Konoha truly were. Judging from the state of their squad, only he and Terumi Mei were left alive. The rest of their team had been completely annihilated. That mist ninja who'd been slashed open by Kei had finally succumbed to blood loss and died in agony. You could say they'd been careless. Or you could say Konoha had dispatched a group of monsters. Either way, their operation was a complete failure. Now, Ao's only goal was to preserve their most valuable asset, Terumi Mei. Release her, Ao said with a deep breath. And I'll release the Hyuga girl. I swear I won't attack you. Oh, that's quite the generous offer. Kei tilted his head, but his hand subtly shifted. But tell me, what makes you think you can defeat me? Your Byakugan. As he spoke, Kei's blade dragged slightly against Terumi Mei's neck, leaving a fine red line as blood began to bead along the cut. Chapter 132, Mistaken. Uchiha Kei didn't immediately slit Terumi Mei's throat, not out of mercy or some romantic sense of pity, and certainly not because he wanted to protect Hyuga Ayaka. In truth, if Ao did go ahead and kill her, Kei would actually be relieved, it would save him a world of trouble. But before that happened, there were a few things he wanted to confirm. Something just didn't sit right with him. And now that he had such a valuable hostage in his hands, Kei wasn't about to waste the opportunity. Under Madara's brutal blood mist policy, the Mist Village was already infamous for its savagery. But even then, they hadn't yet descended into the complete madness that Obito's rule would later bring. At this point in history, bloodline users could still survive in Kurigakure, and some even thrived. Which meant Ao would never let Terumi Mei die so easily. And from Kei's memories, he knew that in the future, Ao would become one of her most trusted allies. Sure, their relationship might not have reached that point yet. But whether it was out of loyalty to Bloodline Ninja or genuine personal connection, Ao definitely wouldn't abandon her. That gave Kei a window to extract the truth he wanted before taking any irreversible steps. He wasn't afraid of Ao, just annoyed by the trouble. But if it came down to it, Kei was confident he could win. So, was that answer satisfying? Kei asked with a polite smile, blade still pressed against Terumi Mei's blood-streaked neck. Give me something of real value, then I might consider a trade. Ao's face twisted with fury. He hadn't expected this little Uchiha brat to be so ruthless. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized, if he were in Kei's shoes, he'd make the same choice. A Hyuga branch family girl, whose secrets were sealed and whose value was minimal, versus a dual Kekkei Genkei wielder from Kurigakure. No contest. Even so, Ao couldn't help the bitterness in his heart. He didn't want a promising future shinobi of the Land of Water to die here, especially in such a humiliating fashion. Hyuga Ayaka's expression wasn't any better. She had already come to a grim conclusion. No matter what this guy Ao said, she was probably going to die. She was just a Hyuga branch member, someone whose very existence was tied to obedience and sacrifice. If her life could buy the survival of a rare mist ninja, anyone would make the trade. Especially someone like Uchiha Kei, cold, pragmatic, and merciless. Ayaka shut her eyes. She no longer held onto any hope. She couldn't rely on Kei to save her. In fact, he was probably praying for her death. If she wanted to live, she'd have to save herself. What do you want to know? Ao finally asked through gritted teeth. Kei gave him a faint smirk, eyes sharp. Why are you here? He asked. And don't give me some vague nonsense. If I don't like your answer, I'll just use genjutsu to interrogate this woman directly. Your call. Don't tell him. Terumi Mei shouted, her voice firm and defiant. Even paralyzed and immobilized, she still had the will to resist. It was clear she hated Kei to the core by now. If it weren't for the paralysis caused by Reikiri's aftershock, she wouldn't need Kei to kill her, she would have cut her own throat against his blade without hesitation. Unfortunately for her, she didn't get to decide. Ao looked silently at Uchiha Kei, then turned his gaze to Terumi Mei. After a long pause, he finally let out a heavy sigh. It was clear, he had made up his mind to speak. Mei, our mission has failed, Ao said flatly. Then he turned to Kei. There's no point hiding it anymore. I don't know how familiar you are with our village, but fairly familiar, Kei nodded calmly. Back in his own world, he had been a devoted fan. After arriving here, he'd taken care to write down everything he remembered, afraid that time might chip away at his memories. This mission, for example, he hadn't recalled every detail off the top of his head, but checking his notes before setting out had become a habit. Then cut the cryptic crap, Kei said coolly, slightly adjusting the position of his blade against Terumi Mei's neck. Speak plainly. Fine, Ao took a deep breath. We serve under Elder Genji as Anbu. Our mission was to investigate. He hesitated. This was a deep and dirty internal scandal from the Mist Village. Under normal circumstances, Ao would never have breathed a word of it to an outsider. But Terumi Mei was a rare and gifted shinobi, someone worth breaking the rules for. Every village had skeletons in its closet. But these were supposed to stay behind closed doors. Once they got out, the damage could be catastrophic. Still, he had no choice. And he knew just how vital Terumi Mei was, even to Elder Genji. Possibly irreplaceable. Our mission was to investigate the true reason behind the third Mizukage's deployment of Anbu, Ao finally ground out, teeth clenched. There. He'd said it. But still wanting to save face, he tried to frame it more delicately. The Anbu under the third Mizukage were sent carrying sensitive items. Our elders were concerned that the Mizukage had been compromised, possibly manipulated. So we were sent to gather intel. Sensitive items. Anbu under the third Mizukage. Kei's expression shifted. A sharp, cold realization hit him, and his face darkened instantly. Damn it. He had completely misunderstood the situation. He hadn't realized that Elder Genji had his own Anbu network. That meant, Ao and Terumi Mei weren't on the same side as the others at all. No wonder these two had survived in the original timeline. They weren't part of the faction Kei had assumed, they were investigators, not co-conspirators. And now Kei was pissed. He'd been planning to find Obito and somehow get his hands on Uchiha Madara's legacy. But now it looked like he'd been barking up the wrong tree all along. How could he not be angry? In fact, he even considered trying to do something drastic, maybe even save Rin Nohara. But deep down, Kei knew Rin's death was almost certainly inevitable. Madara was far too meticulous to let any part of his grand plan go off course. Even if Rin didn't die now, he'd make sure she did later. And Obito? He probably wasn't even Madara's only backup plan. Kei would have to stay vigilant. That said, Obito's descent into darkness would cause a lot of trouble in the future. But it was trouble Kei had already factored into his long-term strategy. In fact, some of that chaos might even work to his advantage. But that all hinged on one condition: Kei needed to get what he came here for. If not, then this entire mission would have been a complete waste of time. That thought made his grip tighten, and the blade in his hand pressed harder into Terumi Mei's neck. A fresh streak of blood trickled down from the open wound, running crimson down her pale skin. Ao's eyes burned with fury, his jaw clenched so tightly he nearly shattered his teeth. The kunai in his hand pushed even closer to Hyuga Ayaka's throat in response. "Where are those Anbu now?" Kei finally asked, his voice frigid and composed again. "To the north," Ao growled. "Your teammate has already gone after them." "Which one? The white-haired or the dark-haired one?" "White-haired." Chapter 133, Coincidence. There were 5 people acting alongside Uchiha Kei, and among them, only one had white hair. Naturally, that was Kakashi. It wasn't hard to guess why Kakashi had gone off in pursuit. Kei didn't need to think twice. It had to be that Rin Nohara had been captured by those hidden mist Anbu during the battle. The moment that thought struck him, Kei could barely contain the surge of emotion. He wanted nothing more than to wrap things up here and rush after them. But he forced himself to take a deep breath and calm down. He was still in the middle of a negotiation. Unfortunately, Ao wasn't a fool. Even if Kei's expression shifted only slightly, Ao caught on immediately. With a cold glint in his eye, Ao suddenly tightened his grip around Hyuga Ayaka's throat. "Looks like you've got another urgent mission, huh, little Uchiha? Whether I do it or not is none of your business." Kei cursed inwardly but kept his expression composed as he met Ao's gaze. "Besides, even if I do have something important to deal with, my teammate's already gone after them, hasn't he?" "Is that so?" Ao's face twisted with a grim sneer. "So you've decided to abandon this little girl? Very decisive. Quite the leader. But have you considered the consequences? If it comes to it, we'll fight to the death," Kei said coldly, staring Ao down. His voice was tough, but his mind was already racing through the risks. Kei didn't know how long it had been since Rin was taken. If too much time had passed, he might not be able to catch up or even locate the Anbu group. To be safe, he needed to move fast. Sure, chasing after them might get him noticed by Black Zetsu or White Zetsu, but at this point, he'd rather risk exposure than walk away with nothing. Besides, he was pretty sure that just by entering the land of grass with Kakashi, he'd already been detected. Still, Kei looked at Hyuga Ayaka, and deep down, he really didn't want to miss this golden opportunity to use someone else's hands to quietly eliminate her. It would be simple. One extra push with the blade, and Terumi Mei would be dead. That would mean Ayaka wouldn't survive either. Losing Ayaka might be regrettable, but dragging the future 5th Mizukage down with her, that wasn't a bad trade at all. But once blood was drawn, Ao would never let it go. Unless Kei directly activated his Mangekyo Sharingan and used a powerful eye technique, there was no telling how long the fight might drag on. Worse still, who knew whether Uchiha Madara's spies, those rat-like Zetsu lurking underground, were watching this unfold? If Obito were to awaken the Mangekyo first, Madara might lose interest in Kei altogether. After all, Madara had already invested a lot into Obito, and Kei, ruthless as he was, wouldn't exactly win the old man's favor. "No matter how I play it, I lose." Kei gritted his teeth in frustration. "Fight, and I waste chakra, risk exposure, and possibly derail future plans. Don't fight, and I miss a perfect chance to eliminate a major threat. What a pain in the ass." Despite the turmoil churning inside him, Kei kept his expression unreadable, staring calmly at Ao. Ao, for his part, was equally composed. He clearly didn't know exactly what Kei was planning, but he could sense that the boy was caught in a dilemma, and so, he said nothing. Instead, he mimicked Kei, pressing his kunai even harder against Hyuga Ayaka's throat, silently declaring, "If you're going to abandon your mission, then I'm going all the way with you." After a long silence, Kei finally sighed in frustration. "Forget it. Let her go. I don't have time to waste on you. Consider yourself lucky." Likewise, Ao snorted coldly. As Kei lowered the blade from Terumi Mei's neck, Ao also withdrew his kunai from Ayaka's. Terumi Mei, still paralyzed, stumbled unsteadily as she tried to walk, though she had recovered slightly. Hyuga Ayaka, on the other hand, had been struck at several key chakra points thanks to Ao's Byakugan, leaving her chakra flow unstable. Physically, they were in roughly the same condition, but emotionally, they couldn't be more different. For Terumi Mei, it was pure humiliation. She had been hailed as a prodigy since childhood, and to end up like this. It was a disgrace. Despite her young age, Terumi Mei had already awakened 2 Kekkei Genkei, a feat that marked her as a shinobi of boundless potential. And yet today, she had been defeated by a ninja whose name she still didn't even know. Yes, she didn't even know what to call him. All she knew was that he was an Uchiha. Beyond that, everything else about him remained shrouded in mystery. Clenching her teeth, she stumbled forward, swearing to herself. One day, I'll find out who he is. And when I do, I'll deal with him myself. Meanwhile, on the other side, Hyuga Ayaka was still reeling from a mix of disbelief and the sense of surviving a close brush with death. She never expected Uchiha Kei to not seize such a perfect opportunity, an opportunity to let his enemies eliminate her for him, cleanly and without consequence. After all, she was someone who had no freedom, someone who knew too much about his secrets. And yet, he had chosen to save her. Ayaka walked in silence, her mind churning. Something's off. Kei couldn't possibly be that kind-hearted. There has to be something else going on here. The two women, Ayaka and Mei, were about 20 meters apart, neither daring to look back. Their eyes locked on each other instead. Their steps matched in pace, slow, steady, as they moved toward one another. Within moments, they were walking side by side. And then, as if by some shared instinct, both paused for a brief moment. They drew in a deep breath, and took a step forward, passing by each other, their shoulders brushing as they moved on. Just then, Ayaka caught sight of Uchiha Kei. His hands were already forming hand seals at lightning speed. The final seal was unmistakably a fire release. At the same moment, Mei saw Ao completing a string of seals as well, ending with a water release. He's going to ambush that Hyuga woman. Is Kei trying to kill me? Both women had the exact same thought. But what neither of them expected was this. A fire dragon and a water dragon shot into the air simultaneously, and collided mid-flight, at precisely the same point. A violent burst of steam erupted into the sky, blanketing the entire area in thick mist. Uchiha Kei stared blankly at the scene before him. And so did Ayaka. But she recovered faster. Seeing Mei stumble backward in confusion, she immediately turned and sprinted toward Ao. Ayaka didn't hesitate either. She dashed full speed toward Kei. From behind the mist, Ao's voice rang out cold and clear. HMPH, Uchiha brat, I'll remember you. We will meet again. TCH. Kei snorted, his eyes narrowing as he looked into the thick wall of steam. He was at a loss for words. Just moments ago, Kei had formed seals with the intention of striking Ayaka directly. His fire dragon jutsu had been crafted to cover a wide area, engulfing Terumi Mei in the process to create the illusion that she was the real target. His goal was simple. Kill the dual bloodline user, Mei, while, accidentally, taking out a Hyuga branch member in the crossfire. That way, Ao would be too busy dealing with Mei's injuries to go after him. But what he didn't expect was that Ao, infuriated by Kei's threats earlier, had chosen to secretly ambush Ayaka as well. Typical Mist Nin behavior, they never let a grudge go unpunished. And so, by pure coincidence, the two jutsu collided perfectly in midair. Instead of injuring anyone, the clash created a thick wall of steam that forced both sides apart, buying everyone the time they needed to retreat safely. Chapter 134, The Smart Ones. Sometimes, coincidences are just maddening. Uchiha Kei had moved in for the kill, only for the other side to coincidentally make the same move. As a result, his actions ended up looking like he was saving someone. What a joke. Faced with such a ridiculous outcome, all Kei could do was silently sigh and think. I guess Hyuga Ayaka's not meant to die just yet. Glancing at her, still tense and clearly confused, Kei found his urge to act had completely faded. Why did you save me? Ayaka's voice was as cold as ever. Wouldn't it be more convenient for you if I just died? If you want to die so badly, Kei said flatly, why don't you slit your own throat with a kunai or jump off a cliff? He didn't even bother hiding his irritation. It wasn't that he wanted to save her, but he also didn't know how to explain the bizarre chain of events. The mist was finally beginning to clear, and with Ao and Terumi Mei gone from sight, Kei let out a breath of relief. He turned to Ayaka, feeling a flicker of anger, but decided not to waste his words. After a moment's pause, he simply asked, "Is Kakashi to the north?" Activating now. Ayaka didn't say anything else. She immediately activated her Byakugan and turned her gaze in the direction Kei had indicated. A few seconds later, she spoke up. "Yes. He seems to be tracking something. But he's pretty far. I can't see that far with my current range." The Byakugan's range, much like the Sharingan's insight, increased with training and chakra control. The difference was that the Sharingan grew stronger with emotional stimuli and chakra surges, while the Byakugan relied more on mastery and chakra synergy. Kei nodded. He sheathed his sword and began walking toward the direction Kakashi had gone. Ayaka was momentarily stunned. She hadn't expected Kei to simply let her go without using this moment to strike. That both relieved her and confused her even more. "Honestly, if I really wanted to kill you, it wouldn't take much effort," Kei said without turning back. "In fact, I've had plenty of chances and methods. Why would I go through the trouble of letting someone else do it? It might be clean, but it's boring. So don't bore me either. If you're really so eager to die, go do it yourself. Who knows, I might even lay a flower for you at the Hero Memorial Stone." "You're joking, Kei-kun," Ayaka replied, her words formal, but her tone still ice-cold. "Besides, someone like me, a caged bird without freedom, could never attract your attention. I was being foolish to even imagine it." "No, you weren't." Kei suddenly stopped and turned around. His crimson Sharingan locked eyes with hers. "I do want to kill you. Because you are a caged bird, one who knows too much, who has ambition, and who is clever enough to use it. You're dangerous. To me, you're a ticking time bomb. If someone offered you the right deal, you'd blow me to pieces without hesitation." Since everything was already out in the open, Kei didn't bother sugarcoating anything. He was pretty sure Ayaka had already figured it out herself anyway. So why pretend? There was no guilt in his voice, only a cold acknowledgement of reality. And in his mind, everyone was living out their own little tragedies. Ayaka was no exception. Some people are just bigger disasters than others. "I knew it," Ayaka murmured with a bitter smile. "So my instincts were right. Kei-kun did have ill will toward me. But for someone like me to be remembered by an eagle soaring so high in the sky, that's still an honor, isn't it?" "Honor?" Kei narrowed his eyes. "You mean, you'd rather kill me yourself?" Uchiha Kei laughed without the slightest restraint. "Don't forget, we're the same kind of people. I can guess what you're thinking just as easily as you can guess mine. Take care of yourself, Ayaka. I hope I never get the chance to come after you. But for your own good, you'd better stay cautious. After all, you're basically a walking explosive tag. Thank you for the lesson, Kei-kun." Hyuga Ayaka gave him a slight bow. But as she straightened up, her tone shifted completely. "Captain, what are my current orders?" "Find a my Kenta," Kei replied with a satisfied nod. Then, casting a casual glance to the side, he added, "You all clean up the corpses here. After that, regroup and back me up." With that, he vanished in a flicker, leaving only the faint ripple of chakra behind. Ayaka stood silently, watching the direction he disappeared into for a long moment before finally letting out a soft sigh. How enviable, a bird that can fly free. Especially for someone like her, trapped in a gilded cage, burdened with secrets, and stripped of freedom. Her dream had always been to be a bird that could soar through the skies. Shaking her head, she turned toward the scattered corpses of the enemy ninja. But when she came to one particular missed nin body, she abruptly stopped. "How much longer are you planning to hide, Kenta-kun?" Ayaka's voice was as icy as ever. "You've been eavesdropping on far too much you had no right to hear. Don't you think that's overstepping?" From the shadow nearby, a Mai Kenta stepped out, dragging a corpse in his hand. He dropped it unceremoniously to the ground and gave her a harmless, almost goofy smile. "Didn't you also stay back out of fear that Kei-kun might make a move?" His tone was light, but his words carried meaning. "Not like I wanted to hear any of that, but for the sake of team unity, you know." "Oh please," Ayaka scoffed. "You say that with a straight face. Don't you feel even a little ashamed?" "I saw you," she added coldly. "The moment Kei moved, you were ready to act. If he had attacked me, you would have been next." "Was I?" Kenta replied, still wearing that same harmless smile. "You must have imagined it, Ayaka-kun. Our captain is not someone who acts unreasonably. And as for what you two talked about, I didn't hear a thing. Ayaka stared at him in silence. Then, just as quickly, she lost interest. Kenta was smart. He clearly understood everything that had happened. And that's exactly what made him so dangerous. He had the cunning to see through everything, and the wisdom to never say it out loud. He always stayed hidden, in the shadows, in the safest, most forgettable corner of any battlefield. He was the kind of person who understood just how deadly visibility could be. And deep down, Kenta knew one thing very clearly: if Kei had attacked Ayaka, he would have been the very next target. Birds cherish their feathers, and the higher one soars, the more they protect them. Kei might not hold an official high rank, but with his growing reputation as a war hero, along with the complicated ties between his clan and the village, he could no longer afford even the smallest misstep. Kenta, of all people, understood this best. With that thought lingering in his mind, he lowered his head and quietly began inspecting the fallen mist nin bodies. No one knew what had been running through his mind just moments before. Chapter 135. Let's hope he's not an idiot. Uchiha Kei trudged silently through the rain. As he walked, memories from a few hours earlier surfaced again, making the corner of his lips twitch into a faint sigh. Confronting Hyuga Ayaka hadn't been part of his original plan. But then again, she wasn't the only smart one around. Kei liked to think he was pretty clever himself. Still, lately he had to admit, maybe the smartest person wasn't either of them. No, that title might just belong to the guy who always wore a dopey smile on his face, Amai Kenta. Even someone like Kei, whose sensory perception was average at best, had noticed Kenta's presence earlier, the same way Ayaka had. And that was saying something. Because Kenta's ability to hide was elite tier. Which only meant one thing: he'd wanted to be noticed. It was a silent form of deterrence, strategically clever and psychologically impactful. His appearance had shifted the dynamics of the moment, dissuading Kei from acting on his impulse to kill Ayaka. 1 versus 2. Kei wasn't afraid, but he had neither the time nor interest in a dragged-out confrontation. Kenta's move brought just enough tension to halt any rash action. It was subtle, almost invisible maneuvering, the kind that altered the entire field. High-level manipulation disguised as coincidence. But also a risky gamble. One misstep and the fire could consume him instead. Kei wasn't eager to play games with someone like Amai Kenta. Still, it got him thinking. A guy that clever might be worth investing a little interest in. Whether to exploit his potential, or to stay on guard in case he caused future trouble, Kei made a mental note to give the matter some thought once they returned to the village. Following Kakashi's trail, Kei had already been chasing for over 3 hours. And yet, he hadn't seen a single trace of him, nothing but empty terrain and old tracks. It was starting to wear on him. Did I take the wrong path? No, that couldn't be it. Kei had taken plenty of time to read the signs along the way, and there were definitely clues confirming the direction. Still, the longer he walked without catching up, the more frustrated he became. Something's off. Suddenly, he felt it. A powerful, almost overwhelming burst of chakra exploded in the distance. Kei stopped in his tracks. The sensation was familiar, but also oddly unusual. It wasn't just raw power, it was brimming with life, something almost unnatural. His brows furrowed. After a few seconds of thought, he pulled out a scroll. Unsealing it, he retrieved 2 items: a black cloak with a hood large enough to fully conceal him, and a plain Anbu mask. Feels kind of pointless, Kei muttered as he suited up. But, who knows? Not sure if Obito's smart enough to figure this out, but someone will probably nudge him in the right direction. With that, he threw the cloak over his body, donned the mask, pulled the hood tight, and took off toward the source of that chakra. Meanwhile, this has to be the place. Kakashi stood silently at the mouth of a cave, his silver hair soaked from the rain. His expression was cold, his eyes sharper than ever. A kunai lay on the ground, beside it, a single strand of hair it had sliced through. That was all he needed to know. Rin had been here, and someone had taken her. He didn't know who yet. But it didn't matter. Whoever they were, they had just been marked for death. But Kakashi wasn't the impulsive type. He knew that if he were alone, he could find ways to outmaneuver these enemies and take them out one by one. However, his current objective was Rin Nohara, and that changed everything. He couldn't afford to protect her and fight off enemies at the same time. At that moment, A line Uchiha Kei had once teased him with floated back into his mind. If I pick up the blade, I can't be by your side. But if I set it down, I can't protect you either. Back then, it felt like idle banter, but now, it hit different. It made a strange kind of sense. Thanks, Pakun, Kakashi murmured, turning to the small Ninken beside him. He had summoned the little ninja dog to help him track Rin. It was a gift, part of his promotion to Jonin, courtesy of the Inuzuka clan. Pakun gave a casual nod, far less grumpy than he'd become in the future. Rest's up to you, kid. Don't die. With a puff of smoke, Pakun vanished. Kakashi took a deep breath, then slipped silently into the cave ahead. From the outside, the cave looked narrow, cramped, even. But once inside, Kakashi quickly realized it was massive, easily large enough to accommodate 30 adult shinobi. Still, something felt off. There were no guards, no traps, nothing stopping him from walking right in. His instincts screamed trap, and he didn't ignore them. Years on the battlefield had taught him exactly how dark and deceptive people could be. Even with peace seemingly just around the corner, the shadows of war hadn't gone anywhere. Taking another steadying breath, Kakashi lifted his forehead protector, uncovering his Sharingan. Instantly, the world around him sharpened, every detail, every subtle motion lit up in vivid clarity. And what he saw made things even more bizarre. What's going on here? Why is this place so poorly guarded? From the traces left behind, it was clear this cave had recently housed 2 to 3 dozen shinobi. So where were they now? Did they leave? Kakashi wondered. Just then, he froze. Voices. Faint, but unmistakable. People talking. Lowering his body, Kakashi crept silently toward the source. And then he saw her. Rin, lying inside a smaller chamber of the cave, her posture slack, her eyes unfocused. She looked dazed, clearly under the effects of some kind of genjutsu. 2 Anbu from Kurigakure stood nearby, casually chatting, something about the 3 tails, though Kakashi didn't pay attention to the details. They were irrelevant right now. He quietly began drawing chakra from deep within, syncing it with his breathing. Each inhale and exhale flowed like a slow, measured tide, feeding more power into his limbs. As the chakra swelled within him, Kakashi's body tensed, his presence sharpening into a deadly stillness. Huh. The 2 missed Anbu paused, finally sensing something was off. But it was too late. Kakashi shot forward like a bolt of lightning. His crimson Sharingan cut through every illusion and movement. His blade danced once, clean, precise. When he came to a halt, standing still in the center of the room, the 2 Anbu behind him were already falling to the ground. Only then did he sheath his blade, one smooth motion, like nothing had ever happened. Rin. Kakashi rushed to her side, kneeling down quickly to check her condition. Seeing the lingering signs of genjutsu, he formed a hand seal. With a pulse of chakra, her dazed eyes began to clear, slowly coming back to life. Chapter 136, The Rescue. In the dimly lit underground cavern, Obito Uchiha lay on a wooden cot, flexing his right hand, trying to rebuild the coordination between his arm and the rest of his body. Honestly, he had long lost track of how long he'd been stuck in this forsaken place. The only thing he remembered was waking up in this underground chamber, surrounded by 2 eerie, inhuman-looking spiral-faced beings. And an old, half-dead man who called himself Uchiha Madara, with strange tubes protruding from his back like a dying relic clinging to life. When the hell can I go back to Konoha already? Obito grumbled under his breath, bitterness thick in his voice. Those spiral freaks told me that Uchiha Kei awakened his Sharingan and even became a hero of Konoha. It's infuriating. If I hadn't been stuck here, that title would have been mine. Maybe Madara had sensed he'd go stir crazy in here, so from time to time, he had White Zetsu bring back news from the outside world. Among the updates was the outcome of the mission they were supposed to complete together. Obito learned that after his supposed death, Uchiha Kei and his team had been reassigned to Minato's squad, and ended up finishing the task Obito was meant to complete. That gave him a tiny sense of relief. Obito knew Kei. Not exactly friends, but not enemies either. Still, he had never particularly liked the guy. He looks cheerful, but something about him feels cold underneath. Every time Obito recalled Kei, he pictured that quiet, composed boy, seemingly kind, yet always distant. Something about him had always unsettled Obito. He shook his head, trying to cast the thought aside. Oddly enough, he almost missed that guy. Yes, there was still an Uchiha here, but Madara. That lunatic had once gone on about abandoning the real world and creating a dream filled with eternal peace. That was the moment Obito knew the old man was completely unhinged. Even if that plan could work, which it can't, it's still fake. So what's the point of living in a fake world? Putting everyone under genjutsu? That's impossible. Guess living too long really does break your brain. Obito had made up his mind. He needed to find a way out of here, and tell Sensei everything. Being around these lunatics was far too dangerous. The spiral faces were crazy. The old relic Madara was even crazier. And Obito? He was not crazy. All he wanted was to get stronger, recover fully, and leave this hellhole. He had to get back to Konoha. Back to Kakashi and Rin. He still had friends waiting. He still wanted to become Hokage. /. Just then, a white silhouette emerged from the wall above him. It was White Zetsu, looking unusually flustered. Obito. Bad news. I just got back from the surface. The ones you mentioned, Rin and that idiot Kakashi, they're in trouble. Obito's heart nearly stopped. This was the first time he'd heard any direct news about Kakashi and Rin since he woke up here. What happened? He shouted, eyes full of panic. They've been ambushed. Just the two of them, surrounded by Mist Ninja. What? Obito's pupils shrank. Mist Nin. But, isn't this still the land of grass? His thoughts spun in confusion. It didn't make sense, but there was no time to figure it out. Obito leapt to his feet. The sheer force of his movement shattered the wooden cot beneath him. He stormed toward the wall, and with one furious punch, sent a thunderous crack through the stone. It wasn't much, not for the deep underground. But it was just the beginning. But Obito's right arm, still not fully healed, cracked under the recoil. It bent unnaturally, like some limp, gelatinous mass stuck to his side. Damn it! He clutched his shoulder, pain and frustration flaring in his eyes. With your current body, there's no way you can break through the wall. A spiral-faced being appeared behind him, speaking calmly. Even so, I have to go. I'm going to save Kakashi and Rin. No matter what, I will go. Obito's voice trembled with resolve, each word heavy and absolute. The spiral-faced creature was silent for a moment, then its body began to unfold, like a flower blooming. Beneath the spiral-patterned mask, there was nothing. Wear me. Its voice echoed beside his ear. That way, you can borrow my strength. The creature's white, plant-like form began wrapping around Obito's body like an armor or cloak. Aren't you Madara's subordinate? Why are you helping me? Didn't you say you wanted to save Kakashi and Rin? Stop asking pointless questions. Thank you. For once, Obito spoke those words sincerely. Moments later, his body was covered by the white, spiral-patterned, cloak. He stretched his right arm, now completely unrestricted. Through the white tubes embedded in the cloak, power surged into him from the demonic statue of the outer path. Obito clenched his fist, and then drove it forward with full force. Boom. The massive stone blocking his path shattered instantly, reduced to rubble in the blink of an eye. Madara lifted his gaze slightly, watching Obito with a calm, indifferent look. So, you're leaving. Yeah, I'm grateful you saved me, but I have a reason. I must go. Obito didn't try to hide his urgency. His heart was racing. You're rushing too much. It might be too soon to thank me. Madara said, still exuding an air of authority despite his frail appearance. I don't think I'll be back. In any case, I've already thanked you. I'm going. You'll come back. And when you do, I'll accept your true gratitude. This time, Obito ignored him. He'd already confirmed Kakashi and Rin's location. Grabbing a black cloak on his way out, he sprinted toward the exit. Minutes later, Obito was greeted by the long-lost light of the surface. It was dusk. Not blinding, but soft and warm. Familiar. Real. As soon as he reached open air, the spiral-shaped mask surrounding his head peeled back like petals, folding into a white hood. Where are Kakashi and Rin? He demanded urgently from the white Zetsu cloak enveloping him. His heart pounded with anxious desperation. Relax, White Zetsu replied, still annoyingly nonchalant. That's one of my clones covering your body. We can communicate through shared thought. He'll guide you. Spiral face, can you hear me? Obito called out. Loud and clear, the familiar warped voice echoed in his mind. Head directly east. I'll lead you. Got it. Without hesitation, Obito dashed eastward, leaping across the forest canopy with incredible speed. What's their situation now? He shouted as he ran, voice tense. From what my buddy reported, it's bad. They're surrounded by dozens of mist ninja. All of them are elite Anbu types. They were also talking about some kind of test subject. No idea what that's about though. Test subject. Obito muttered, expression darkening. He pushed himself even faster. The roaring wind couldn't cool the storm in his chest. What about Minato sensei? Where is he? Who? I said. What's the yellow flash doing right now? Oh, he's off handling some other mission, negotiating with the stone ninja, I think. Word is that Konoha's about to win big. Zetsu's voice remained maddeningly casual. About to win the war. Then why? Why does it have to be now of all times? Obito clenched his fists, feeling helpless, but he didn't stop running. Kakahi, you promised me. You said you'd protect Rin. Hold on just a little longer. I'm coming. / Chapter 137, Freeze Frame. Rin, hang in there. We're almost across the border into the land of fire. Kakashi urged Rin on while shielding her from the enemy, sprinting toward the fire country's frontier. But despite his words, a heavy sense of dread sat deep in Kakashi's heart. A glance behind revealed 20 to 30 mist Anbu ninjas in pursuit. Things couldn't be worse. After taking down the 2 mist ninjas who'd stayed behind to guard her, Kakashi had finally managed to break the genjutsu cast on Rin. But what he learned after she regained consciousness had horrified him. Rin had a tailed beast sealed inside her. He had no idea why the mist would do such a thing. His mind was in chaos, and then, just like that, the rest of the mist Anbu returned. Left with no choice, Kakashi grabbed Rin and started fleeing with a single, desperate goal in mind. Get back to Konoha. Konoha had the best seal masters, and more importantly, their teacher's wife lived there. Very few knew that Kushina Uzumaki was the Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails, but as Namikaze Minato's students, they were among those few. Now running at full speed with Rin, Kakashi suddenly felt something was off. Why Rin? Why would they seal a tailed beast inside her? Why had the breakout been so easy? Why were the mist Anbu chasing them with such persistence, yet none of them had truly tried to kill? Even when Kakashi countered and killed a few, the rest only pressed closer without delivering a fatal blow. Too many questions swirled in Kakashi's head, but there was no time to reflect, because the mist nin were closing in fast. Damn it! Kakashi cursed under his breath. He drew his blade and slashed at an approaching mist ninja with a powerful arc. The enemy reacted swiftly, retreating with a kunai raised, not engaging in a prolonged fight, just stalling, harassing. Not a single one of them seemed intent on letting Kakashi and Rin escape. They weren't here to kill. They were here to trap. / Rin ran silently ahead of Kakashi, feeling the violent, foreign chakra churning within her. She was overwhelmed, physically, mentally, emotionally. She could feel it. The tailed beast's power growing stronger inside her. And she was starting to understand the mist's plan. These Anbu didn't want to stop her from reaching the land of fire. They wanted her to reach it. They wanted her to make it all the way to Konoha. And the more she thought about it, the more horrifying the realization became. What would happen if the 3 tails rampaged inside Konoha? She didn't want to imagine it. She couldn't find the words to explain it to Kakashi, and even if she did, what could they possibly do? Obito, what would you do if it were you? Rin thought to herself, eyes misting as she imagined the boy who always smiled at her like an idiot. The boy so different from the cold and distant Uchiha Kei. The boy who was filled with sunlight and warmth. He'd sacrificed everything to save Kakashi. Even knowing he would die, he had entrusted his only Sharingan to him. And now, Rin felt a quiet voice rising in her heart. A whisper that grew louder with every step. A temptation. A resolve. Her dazed eyes slowly regained clarity. She looked at the crackling lightning chakra around Kakashi's blade. And she made a decision. Far away, in the dense forest, a shadow was racing toward them at incredible speed. Uchiha Obito scanned the area with his only remaining right eye, dashing through the forest under the guidance of the spiral face's voice, headed straight for the battlefield where Kakashi and the others were. Obito, I suspect a fight is about to break out soon. Before that happens, there's something I need to tell you. What is it? Obito responded quickly, his Sharingan spinning as he sprinted through the woods, his pace undeterred. You're not as good a fighter as I am. Right now, I'm using this large body to protect your wounded one. If a battle does break out, it would be best for me to fight in your place. Obito's hair streamed wildly in the wind. No need, he said sharply. Madara once told me that a Sharingan only shows its true power when both eyes are together. Kakashi has the matching eye, he's on the battlefield. If I team up with him, we'll be stronger than you alone. This time, I'm protecting Rin. With him. Zetsu fell silent. He said nothing for a few seconds, and that in itself was rare. Silence was torture for someone as talkative as him. You've got a point. And now that your body's been implanted with Hashirama's cells, the fusion of Uchiha and Senju bloodlines might awaken a power no one's seen before. Their silhouette blurred through the woods, time slipping by. 3 hours passed in what felt like moments. It was summer, and the sunset seemed to drag on forever, though the sky had already begun to dim. Then, suddenly, raindrops started falling from the sky. Rain. What's going on? Obito muttered, looking up. The spiral face's voice echoed softly in his ear. Obito, we're close. Good. Obito's expression hardened. As they neared their destination, a strange burning sensation flared in his missing left eye socket. It was as if the Sharingan was resonating, shattered images and blurred visions flickered across his mind. Damn it! What the hell is going on? Clutching his face in pain, Obito let out a low growl. A twisted expression contorted his face. Stop overthinking it, we're almost there. I'm coming. Just hold on, Kakashi, Rin. Obito's anxiety surged, triggering a surge of chakra within him. His speed increased once more, the surrounding trees becoming a blur. And then, he burst through a final cluster of bushes, and the forest suddenly opened up. And there it was, the battlefield laid bare before his eyes. But, his Sharingan narrowed, the two tomo in his right eye contracting in disbelief. The scene before him was something he could have never imagined, not even in his worst nightmares. For a second, his thoughts stopped. The world turned pitch black. A coldness seeped into his very bones. Thunder cracked across the sky like a screeching chorus of birds. Lightning surged through Kakashi's blade. And then, that blade pierced the chest of the girl he loved. Time froze. Bang. Rin's body collapsed to the ground, blood trickling from the corner of her mouth. She would never stand again. /. I'm Rin. You're Obito, right? Nice to meet you. Obito, you're late again. Obito, you're so cool. Well, I guess Kakashi's even cooler. How many times do I have to tell you, don't act tough when you're hurt? I've been watching you this whole time. Now hold out your hand. Obito, we're heading out for a mission. I'm kind of nervous. /. Memories crashed through his mind like a dam bursting. His brain felt like it would explode. His heart ached with a pain so sharp, it shattered him. Not even the despair of Kannabi Bridge, when he thought he would die, could compare to this. Kakashi, I'm counting on you to protect Rin. Of all the memories, only that one sentence echoed in his head. A tear of blood spilled uncontrollably from Obito's right eye. The tomo began to spin wildly. To be continued. /. Chapter 138, Rampage. As Rin collapsed to the ground, Kakashi stood frozen in place. His hand gripping the ninja blade trembled uncontrollably. I killed Rin. I killed Rin. I killed Rin. Kakashi's right hand began to shake violently, the realization crashing down like a tidal wave. Rin's face, her smile, her voice, flashed before his eyes. And in his ears echoed Obito's words. Kakashi, I'm counting on you to protect Rin. Take care of her. Grief, helplessness, and a numbing sense of isolation engulfed him like a void. Kakashi slowly drew the blade from Rin's chest. Looking down at her now lifeless body, her breath barely lingering, a wave of dizziness overwhelmed him, and he collapsed to the ground. Obito, who had witnessed everything, let out a soul-shattering scream. His chakra surged violently, flooding toward his eye. The red tomo stretched and twisted. Within seconds, a new shape formed, a mangekyo resembling a spinning windmill. Immense ocular power surged through his body. But Obito had no time to dwell on this awakening. An unbearable burning sensation erupted across the right half of his body. The white hood covering his head unraveled, transforming into barbed plant-like growths, woven together by raging chakra. In the next instant, it morphed into a new white spiral mask, leaving only a single blood-red eye glaring forward with chilling intent. His right side convulsed and mutated. Wooden spikes burst from his flesh like jagged tree trunks. Hashirama's cells, implanted into his body, erupted without restraint. Backslash dash dash dash. Who is that? One of the masked mist Anbu turned around, still distracted by Kakashi's earlier attack. Is that a Konoha Rain? He's alone. Reinforcement or not, kill him. The mist nin whispered among themselves. With so many wearing identical masks, it was impossible to tell who had spoken. In the next moment, several shurikens sliced through the air toward Obito. Clang, clang, clang. The shuriken passed straight through his body and embedded in the tree behind him. None of them could even see how he'd evaded them. This world, this kind of twisted reality. Obito raised his head. His voice was a guttural snarl, barely human. I will never accept it. His Mangekyo Sharingan burned bright, laced with blood-red veins. With an explosive force, he launched himself forward, shattering the ground beneath his feet. Bastard. Don't underestimate us. A mist nin charged with a blade, shouting angrily. Their shadows clashed. In a flash, the mist nin was hurled backward, impaled by wooden spikes. A shower of blood sprayed into the rain, staining Obito's white spiral mask in an eerily beautiful red. Another enemy rushed in. Obito sidestepped, and with a twist of his wrist, a wooden spike sprouted from his sleeve, piercing the ninja cleanly through. His blood-red eye locked onto his victim, merciless, unfeeling, terrifying. Ah! The mist nin trembled, paralyzed by the monstrous figure before him. Above, 3 more mist nin leapt into the air, blades descending with a flash of steel. They stabbed down with full force, but passed through Obito as if he were air. Instead, their blades pierced their own comrade below. What? We passed through him. Before they could react, Obito spun midair like a top, kicking all 3 away with bone-crushing force. What's happening? Strange jutsu, everyone be alert. Don't panic. He's still just one man. The mist nin tightened formation, voices overlapping in tense confusion. Then one of them suddenly remembered something. Forget him. We need to complete the mission. Retrieve the test subject, take the girl's body. At the order, 2 mist nin broke formation and ran toward Rin's corpse. But that move touched Obito's reverse scale. He let out a deafening roar and charged toward them without hesitation, like a wild beast unleashed. Stop him! Mist nin shouted, slashing their blades as rain splashed around them. But every attack passed through him like mist. He weaved through them like a phantom, untouchable, unstoppable. Damn it! He really is intangible. A ninja cursed, swinging downward. The blade once again passed straight through Obito's body. Obito ignored them all. He threw a sharpened wooden spike toward the 2 shinobi by Rin. It struck one of them instantly. Obito formed the hand seals purely on instinct. The wooden spike suddenly expanded, exploding outward into countless thick branches that tore the enemy's body apart from the inside out. So, he used wood release without even realizing it. The cutting sprout technique. Now I understand why Madara chose you, murmured the masked figure with the vortex-shaped face, watching silently from the shadows. Backslash dash dash dash. Ah! Obito screamed in anguish, turning and slamming a fist into the chest of another mist ninja. Boom! The sheer force embedded the man deep into the earth, shattering the ground beneath him. It was a blow that could rival even Tsunade's monstrous strength. The mist nin had already died on the first hit, but Obito, lost in his fury, dragged the corpse back up, and punched again. And again. And again. Each strike more brutal than the last, a bloody and senseless display of wrath and grief. Backslash dash dash dash. What is this thing? A mist Anbu at the rear stumbled back involuntarily. Even the hand gripping his blade was trembling. Obito finally rose to his feet, the mangled body now unrecognizable. His own body was drenched in blood, the rain falling hard now, as if the heavens themselves were trying to wash the horror away. Above, the blood on the earth reflected back into the sky, dyeing the full moon a deep, ominous crimson. The rain, the blood, the silence, everything had turned nightmarish. Obito stood beneath that blood-red moon. His white spiral mask, soaked in blood, looked colder than ever, like the visage of a demon walking straight out of hell. Why you think this is enough to scare us? One of the mist nin tried to sound defiant, but the trembling in his voice betrayed him. Suddenly, Obito roared. The right half of his body surged with power and swelled grotesquely. Countless wooden tendrils exploded from him, lashing out in every direction. Several mist nin, caught off guard, were skewered on the spot, pierced like paper dolls. And so began the slaughter. Backslash dash dash dash. Obito had no awareness of what he was doing. Ever since he saw Rin collapse, something inside him had shattered. His Actions were no longer conscious, they were purely instinctive, driven by grief, hatred, and a bottomless rage. There was only one thought left in his mind. No one touches Rin. No one. Backslash dash dash dash. Screams echoed through the battlefield. Blood pooled beneath the bodies. Rain mingled with it, turning the earth into a muddy, red-soaked river, a grotesque crimson swamp under the stormy sky. By the time Obito came back to his senses, everyone was dead. Backslash dash dash dash. He slowly walked over to Rin's lifeless body. Kneeling beside her, he gently lifted her into his arms, as if holding a sleeping beauty, terrified that any movement might wake her from her eternal slumber. The spiral mask unraveled. Obito wrapped his arms tightly around her, holding her close amidst the sea of blood. Is this what they call hell? Backslash dash dash dash. Above them, the crimson moon cast a light that was anything but pure. And just then, at the edge of the blood-soaked battlefield, a shadow emerged. A man in a black cloak, wearing a hood and a mask, stepped silently into view. Chapter 139. I've long been in hell. Too late. Uchiha Kei slowly stepped onto the edge of the battlefield, frowning at the sea of corpses strewn before him. He had finally confirmed what he had sensed earlier, that chakra. It was wood release. There could be no other explanation. With a quiet sigh, Kei felt a headache coming on. His gaze shifted toward the black-clad figure not far away, who was holding Rin Nohara's lifeless body and weeping uncontrollably. That must be Uchiha Obito. Despite knowing the truth, Kei still decided to confront him, for the sake of his own plans. Especially after noticing that white, plant-like substance covering the man's body, his heart skipped a beat. If my memory's correct, that's white Zetsu. Taking a deep breath, Uchiha Kei began walking toward Obito. With each step, his eyes shifted, slowly turning into a pair of scarlet Mangekyo Sharingan. When he was only a dozen paces away, his expression remained calm, his tone cold and detached. Put her down. Who are you? Did you kill Rin Nohara? Though Kei already knew the answer, he had to pretend otherwise. After all, Obito wasn't in his right mind right now, completely unhinged and dangerous. And worse, his body was laced with white Zetsu cells. It was no exaggeration to say that this very moment laid the foundation for Obito's future evolution, mastering the Rinnegan, becoming the Ten Tails Jinchuriki, and eventually stepping into the Sage of Six Paths mode. Backslash dash dash dash. I killed Rin. Hey, I killed Rin. Obito, still facing away, began to tremble as he clutched her corpse tighter. The white shell of Zetsu around him rippled and shifted again, gradually creeping up and fully enclosing his face. You said I killed Rin. As the words left his mouth, Obito lunged at Kei without hesitation, his speed near instantaneous. His right arm lashed forward. Wood release. Piercing tree technique. But Uchiha Kei wasn't like the mist Anbu from before. He knew exactly who Obito was. And more importantly, he understood the specific abilities granted by his Mangekyo Sharingan. Apart from not knowing the precise theme of Obito's ocular powers, Kei could see through almost everything else about him. Backslash dash dash dash. Die. Raiden. Reikiri. Kei's cloak fluttered though there was no wind. In a flash of lightning, his ninja blade was already unsheathed. As blade met wooden spike, Kei instantly noticed something was wrong, the wooden spike was phasing through. Backslash dash dash dash. His Sharingan saw it clearly. In that crucial moment, his right eye shimmered, releasing a strange, foreign chakra. Chrono Drift. It was a technique derived from the feedback loop of his Mangekyo. Though its full potential was said to rewind time itself, Kei's current mastery only allowed him to slow it, for others. But that was enough. All he needed was an instant. Backslash dash dash dash. Suddenly, Obito's movements slowed dramatically. Even in the slowed down frame, Kei could clearly see the madness in his eyes. With a subtle shift, Uchiha Kei narrowly avoided the phasing wooden spikes. In the same fluid motion, he twisted his blade downward. And in the blink of an eye, his sword, charged with lightning chakra, pierced straight through Obito's body. A surge of violent lightning erupted. Obito let out a sharp cry, his body convulsing from the impact as Kei's blade passed completely through him. Obito stared in disbelief at the wound now torn across his chest. The injury was already beginning to regenerate rapidly. But there was no mistaking it. He had been hit. Backslash dash dash dash. You're not paralyzed. Kei raised an eyebrow, equally surprised. Obito was still on his feet. No signs of paralysis. No sluggish movement. Just Rage. And Kei had not struck the white Zetsu-covered areas either. After a moment's thought, Kei could only sigh to himself. What absurd luck. The benefits of being fused with white Zetsu were beginning to show. Not only did Obito now possess insanely fast regeneration, but he also seemed immune to most negative effects, paralysis included. Who the hell are you? Obito seemed to regain a shred of clarity. He clenched his fists and glared at Kei. And what the hell was that just now? Just a leaf shinobi. Kei replied coolly, trying to remain vague. He knew his identity wouldn't stay hidden forever, but there was no need to give anything away yet. And you killed Rin. You killed Kakashi. You slaughtered an entire unit of Mist Ninja. Aren't you afraid of retaliation? Retaliation. Obito laughed. A dry, bitter, insane laugh. You think I care about revenge? I've been in hell all along. Afraid? No. I should be thanking all of you. I should show you all just how grateful I am. // With a deranged gleam in his eye, Obito lunged again. He was fast. Too fast. His right fist lashed out like a cannon. Kei met the charge head-on without hesitation. // At this point, Obito had the backing of White Zetsu and Mangekyo Sharingan. His strength, chakra, and speed were overwhelming. Each punch landed with terrifying force, rivaling even Tsunade's monstrous strength. But, despite all that power, he was sloppy. Obito, for all his might, lacked solid fundamentals. He had power, yes, but he had no idea how to use it. Both he and Kei had grown up as nobodies within the Uchiha clan, sidelined and overlooked. At least Kei had a father who was once a Chunin, who taught him some basics. Obito, on the other hand, had no one. All he had ever learned came from the academy and his own clumsy training. Kei, with full knowledge of Obito's abilities, didn't need to go all out. Even while limiting his use of ocular jutsu, he could hold his ground. And with time, his advantage only grew. Obito was getting frustrated. Why can't I land a single blow? It's like he's seeing right through me. Another brief clash. Kei seized the perfect opening. Just as Obito began to phase, Kei activated his left eye's Mangekyo ability. Chrono Leap. In a ghost-like blur, he slipped behind Obito and drove his blade deep into his chest once more. Obito tried to phase, tried to disappear into intangibility again. But this time, something changed. // His body shimmered, then began to fade entirely. Right before Kei's eyes, Uchiha Obito simply vanished. As though he'd never been there at all. Only the corpses remained. And above them, bathed in blood, red light, hung a crescent moon, dyed crimson by the carnage. // Chapter 140. Creating a New World. Where did he go? Uchiha Kei stood quietly in place, his ninja blade upright before him, ready to guard against another sudden ambush from Obito. But after standing there like a fool for quite a while, he realized Obito really was gone. He actually left. Kei glanced around warily, still unable to figure out why Obito had retreated so suddenly. He had just started to get a solid grasp on Obito's attack rhythm and was planning to take advantage of the next opportunity to slash at the part of him merged with White Zetsu. But soon, Kei let out a quiet sigh. Well, maybe it's for the best. Even though he had the upper hand, Kei was very aware of his own limits. His eyes were starting to sting and feel sore. Unlike Obito, he didn't have any White Zetsu cells enhancing his body. Every use of his Sharingan was a real drain on his dwindling ocular power. Still, Kei didn't relax completely. Better stay cautious, who knows if that guy's planning to sneak back for a surprise attack. He kept his blade drawn as he slowly made his way toward Kakashi's position. After a quick scan of the surroundings, he knelt down to check on his unconscious teammate. Fortunately, there wasn't anything physically wrong. Kakashi had simply passed out from emotional overload. His chakra reserves were still full, no signs of major injury or trauma. That discovery allowed Kei to finally breathe a little easier. Even though the events had deviated heavily from the original timeline, the divergence wasn't too extreme. Kakashi was still a key part of Kei's overall plan. Then, just as he was about to stand, Kei caught a glimpse of the wound over Kakashi's left eye, and an idea flickered in his mind. He gently lifted the boy's eyelid. There, in Kakashi's eye socket, glimmered a crimson Sharingan with 3 tomo. Kei nodded slightly. So the intense shock and the resonance with Obito's eye, it awakened the Mangekyo Sharingan. He wasn't entirely sure what this version of the Mangekyo's ability might be. After all, Kakashi wasn't a pure-blooded Uchiha, and the chakra consumption would be brutal no matter the technique. Kei suspected the eye's ability was likely body or perception-based, not chakra-based. Because if it were the latter, Kakashi would have been long drained dry. Or perhaps because of his bloodline, Kakashi wasn't receiving the same level of feedback or adaptation as a true Uchiha. After thinking for a while, Kei let out a sigh and gently released the eyelid. He didn't take the eye back. That Sharingan was a symbol of the friendship between Kakashi and Obito. And who knew, maybe it would come in handy someday. Kei then turned toward Rin's body. She lay silently in a pool of blood. All around her, mist Anbu corpses hung from a nearby tree, an eerie and chilling scene. But Kei wasn't fazed. He'd seen far worse horrors before. Still, Rin's death gave him a moment of pause. Though he'd never been close with her, he had to admit, her gentle nature was likable. Suddenly, Kei sensed a slow but distinct chakra leaking from Rin's body. He froze for a moment. This chakra, is that Isobu, the three tails? Without hesitation, he quickly pulled out a blank scroll. This chakra was too precious to waste. Even if it didn't prove useful now, it was still worth researching. He shifted his ninja blade to his left hand and pulled out a brush with his right, ready to start sealing. But then he paused again, mid-motion. An idea sparked. After a long moment of contemplation, a smile curled at the edge of Kei's lips. He moved quickly, scrawling intricate sealing runes across the scroll. Then, with a firm clap of his palms, both Rin's body and the leaking chakra of the three tails were sealed into the scroll. Uchiha Obito, I might just have a little gift prepared for you in the future. //. Meanwhile, in a secret underground base, Uchiha Obito, voice low and grim, asked, was that really Uchiha Kei? That cold, creepy guy? White Zetsu's voice echoed at his ear. My other clones confirmed it. Yes, it was him. And he's strong. Very strong. If I'm not mistaken, he's already awakened the Mangekyo Sharingan. You're no match for him right now. You only have one eye, and he's already started to read through your abilities. Mangekyo Sharingan, Obito blinked in surprise. Then his expression returned to calm, even as questions raced through his mind. So that power just now, the one that let me enter that strange, twisted space, it came from my eye. Without that power, he probably would have been finished by Kei already. Mangekyo Sharingan, White Zetsu chuckled. A unique power that only the Uchiha clan can awaken. To open those eyes, you need a massive emotional trauma, like killing the person you love most, or watching them die in front of you. Either way, the pain has to be overwhelming. Sounds just like you, doesn't it? Obito's tone grew icy. So that guy really is as twisted as he seems. He must have either watched his dearest person die, or worse, killed them with his own hands. He remembered that Kei had been on the battlefield early. He'd gone through squad after squad, yet he was always the one to survive. Maybe he really did kill all his teammates one by one, that would explain how he got those eyes. And it's only those eyes that allowed him to find my weaknesses and defeat me. But Obito didn't despair. He had just awakened this eye. He still wasn't familiar with its true potential. Give me time, he muttered. Eventually, Uchiha Kei will fall to me. He began walking forward, silently, through the dim corridors of the base. The place was filled with memories. He'd once thought he would never return. Or at least, not until much later. But fate had played a cruel joke. In the span of a single moment, his entire world had changed. He hadn't brought Rin's body back. Because he knew. If she knew she would die, Rin would have wanted to be buried in Konoha. At the heart of the base, an old man with snow-white hair watched his return. Uchiha Madara curled his lips into a faint smile. So, you came back after all. Obito stood before him, still stained with blood. And in his eyes, burned the desire to create a new world. He didn't look surprised, because everything had gone exactly as he planned. His scheme had been a success. He knew the Uchiha clan all too well. To win Obito's trust more completely, Madara even allowed him to uncover part of the truth, just enough to be convincing. The deeper, more dangerous layers remained carefully hidden. For instance, when the time came for Obito to discover that Rin had been implanted with the three tails, and that Kakashi had no choice in her death, he would stop questioning the darker truth. I'm going to create a perfect new world. I don't need this one without Rin. In the shadowy depths of the underground, Uchiha Obito spoke in a low, unwavering voice. Excellent, Madara chuckled, before suddenly asking in a quieter tone, "No one saw Obito fighting, right?" White Zetsu, standing nearby, replied. "There was a problem. Kakashi survived. And there's a new variable, that man appears to be Uchiha Kei. He seems to have awakened the Mangekyo as well. Obito wasn't his match. If not for my intervention, Obito would already be dead." "I see," Madara murmured. He had already learned as much from the local Zetsu. But now that Obito was in his grasp, he had no interest in wasting time cultivating another tool from scratch, especially one whose background was still unclear. "Uchiha Kei. Interesting. What abilities does he have? Do you want me to come up with a plan too?" "No need," Obito interrupted coldly. "I don't know what his ability is, and I don't need your help either. I'll deal with him myself. I used to know him, but to me, he's no different from Kakashi. Just another obstacle. A worthy opponent, perhaps. Besides, in the world I'll create, Kakashi will be there. Rin will be there. Everyone will be. Maybe even him. That's enough, Madara. Stop wasting time on irrelevant people. Just tell me what I need to do to create the dream world." "TCH, young people really are impatient," Madara smirked. "Fine, have it your way. And don't bother thanking me. Come forward. From this moment on, you are the savior of the world." Without hesitation, Obito stepped closer. Madara looked into his eyes. "Look into mine." Obito looked up, the scarlet three-tomo Sharingan flickering in his gaze. In that moment, a monstrous chakra surged from behind Madara, the Gedo statue's overwhelming presence filling the air. But before Obito could process what he was sensing, everything shifted. In the blink of an eye, he found himself in a vast, blindingly white space. "Where is this?" "This is my genjutsu domain," Madara, still appearing as his elderly self, answered calmly. "It's empty now, but everything you see here can be shaped by my will. If I wish it, anything can be projected into reality. Like this." As he spoke, a burst of chakra erupted from his body. Obito instinctively took a step back, sensing the space around him shift in a way he couldn't fully understand. And then, before his eyes, Madara began to change. His silver hair turned jet black, the wrinkles vanished, and his body regained the vitality of youth. A crimson armor draped over him, radiating an overwhelming pressure. "Ah, it's been a while since I felt this kind of youthful strength," Madara said, clenching his fist. "So this is what you looked like in your prime." Obito was stunned, though he kept his voice steady. "This space really is incredible. It can even turn back time." Madara, now fully restored to his youthful form, smiled lightly. It's nothing. With the power of the Gedo statue, nothing is impossible. Even raising the dead is a trivial matter. All we need to do is create a perfect world using genjutsu, then cast it upon everyone, and bring them inside."
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of This Uchiha is Way Too Cautious. Do you want to see what happens next, or maybe you'd rather read ahead at your own pace? Check out my Patreon page at patreon.com/mvsensen7, where you'll find early access to upcoming parts and plenty of other fanfiction stories waiting for you. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, share it with fellow Naruto fans, and subscribe to the channel for more epic adventures. I'll see you in the next episode.